The chair, council members, and participants, we are now live.
Morning. Today is Friday, April 29th. This is the Joint Committee on Finance and Transportation Public Utilities. I'm Councilmember at Large Derek Green, the chair of the Finance Committee. I want to thank all of you for being with us this morning. I understand that state law currently requires that the following announcement be made at the beginning of every remote public hearing as follows. Due to the current public health emergency, city council committees are currently meeting remotely. We are using Microsoft Teams to make these remote hearings possible. Excuse me. Instructions for how the public may view and offer public testimony at public hearings of council committees are included in the public hearing notices that are published in the Daily News, Inquirer, and Legal Intelligentsia prior to the hearings and can also be found on phlcouncil.com. I now note that the hour has come for the beginning of this hearing. Mr. Iannuzzi, will you please call the roll to take attendance? Members that are in attendance, will you please indicate that you are present when your name is called. Also, please say a few brief words when responding so that your image will be displayed on screen when you speak.
Councilmember Cindy Bass.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, colleagues, and our viewing public. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Councilmember Kendra Brooks.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, colleagues. I am present.
Good morning.
Councilmember Alan Dom.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, colleagues, and the attendees and the viewing public present.
Good morning.
Councilmember Helen Gim.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, and good morning, colleagues. I am present.
Good morning.
Councilmember Mark Squillo.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and colleagues. Present.
Good morning.
And Chair Green.
I am present as well. Thank you all of my colleagues that are here. We are now, I have a quorum of this committee with the council members who are present, and this hearing is now formally called to order. This is a joint public hearing of the Committees on Finance and Transportation Public Utilities regarding resolution number 210653. Mr. Iannuzzi, will you please read the title of the resolution?
Resolution number 210653, resolution authorizing the Committee on Finance and the Committee on Transportation and Public Utilities to conduct joint hearings regarding the sustainability and diversification of the Philadelphia Gas Works.
Thank you, Mr. Iannuzzi. Before we begin to hear testimony from the witnesses we have here for today, everyone who has been invited to this meeting to testify should be aware that this public hearing is being recorded. Because the hearing is public, participants and viewers should have no reasonable expectation of privacy. By continuing to be in the meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. Additionally, prior to recognizing members for questions or comments they have for witnesses, I will note for the record at this time that we will use the chat feature available in Microsoft Teams to allow members to signify that they wish to be recognized. In order to comply with the Sunshine Act, the chat feature must only be used for this purpose. I know
Councilmember Green.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I was just going to add to the attendance list. I believe council members Jones and Gilmore Richardson have joined us.
Okay, thank you, and welcome council members Jones and Gilmore Richardson. At this point, I note that Councilmember Gim would like to make a comment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I wanted to make sure that it's an appropriate time, but I appreciate your allowing me some time. And I wanted to, most of all, thank you for reconvening this discussion to ensure that all stakeholders have an opportunity to have their voices heard on the critical issue of sustainability and diversification for PGW. I know that, and I'm very much looking forward to listening to the testimony today. We have many goals that we have to meet, ensuring that all Philadelphians have the energy that they need for a dignified life at an affordable rate. We have to protect our residents' health. We have a commitment to eliminate the use of fossil fuels by 2050 at a minimum and we must protect and create and expand union jobs and ensure that workers aren't left behind. But one of the things that's also really clear is we have to reject the false choices that we can only achieve some of these goals, or that these goals have to be sacrificed, for timelines. The objective here is to figure out how to accomplish these objectives together, ensuring that residents have affordable heating that doesn't harm our planet and pose health risks at the same time. This is an extraordinarily complicated issue, there's no question, but that does not mean that we have the luxury to move slowly. Rather, we have to be more aggressive than ever and act with urgency in exploring and pursuing alternatives to meet our energy needs and to preserve a livable climate. So what I'm looking forward to hearing from some of our testifiers today is what comes next. There's no question that PGW has to make investments this year to prepare for a network geothermal pilot that focuses on identifying sites to maximize benefits to low-income Philadelphians, to neighborhoods in need, and maximizes the involvement of PGW workers and their union. I'm also looking to hear about how PGW will establish and share a business plan that is actually aligned to the city's goal of reaching climate neutrality by 2050. And this should absolutely include interim targets and annual goals. We are not going to get to a sustainable climate future without actually charting a path that includes specific actions and commitments along the way, each and every year. No longer 5-year, 10-year plans, but each and every year. And lastly, I want to address concerns that were raised in the last hearing. PGW is a municipally owned agency, and many of us on this council body firmly believed in and fought for it to remain municipally owned. Part of the promise of our keeping a public utility was that it would be committed to working in alignment with the city's stated climate and energy goals and in the best interests of Philadelphia's future, not on behalf of its industry, not on behalf of lobbyists, and especially not on behalf of elected officials or entities outside of Philadelphia who are seeking to pass legislation that would preempt our rights and authority or run counter to our interests and stated goals. Legislation like SB 275, in which PGW had active involvement, is expressly against the city's best interests. It seeks to limit our authority as a municipality and prohibit our ability to enact future climate laws. When we convened in February, PGW's leadership failed to make clear their commitment that moving forward, they would oppose efforts like SB 275 that exist in contradiction to the city of Philadelphia. That has to change. PGW should come out publicly against efforts like SB 275, as this council has, as our city has. And it must pass new policies that govern their responsibility and conduct to ensure that these types of actions no longer impact our city and our ability to chart our own future. We are one city, or one entity, seeking common interests. I have yet to hear a commitment from PGW's leadership that they will take that mission seriously. And so I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation, to listening to our panel testifiers, and want to express tremendous gratitude to the testifiers and to the public for keeping us on this mission. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Before we start with the first witness, I want to thank the various participants who are here this morning, and also thank all of the various individuals that participated in the diversification study. We know that PGW is a unique entity. It is the largest municipally owned gas utility, definitely in this country, probably North America, if not in the world. So we have a very challenging dynamic of how do we transition PGW from the entity that it currently is to an entity into the future. But at the same point, we also realize that we have a very significant moderate to income rate base in the city of Philadelphia who are PGW customers, many who are just learning about some of the opportunities that we're presenting for them, but also many of those same customers have challenges in just putting food on the table or making sure they have a sustainable home, as well as being able to provide for their family members and their relatives. So we have a very challenging balance of how we move forward a utility that has a number of ratepayers who are moderate to low income, but at the same point, how do we move forward this entity and transform this entity going forward, as well as the fact that we have a unionized workforce that needs to maintain good family sustaining wages as we go forward. So this is a complex issue, a challenging issue. I'm very fortunate that we have in our city a number of individuals who are committed on addressing this issue and helping us to move Philadelphia Gas Works forward. Some people may not realize that PGW started in 1836 really as a lighting company, where gas was used to really light the city, and it moved from a lighting company to being a heating company. So the fact that this entity has already made two types of transitions gives me the perspective that in the history and DNA of PGW, we have transformed this entity. I look forward to this entity transforming again into a future that is much more sustainable with all of the complexities and challenges that we have before us. So this is a complex challenge. The diversification study that PGW undertook along with the Office of Sustainability as well as the Philadelphia Energy Authority puts us on that path. In addition, I believe that the Investment, Infrastructure, and Jobs Act provides another opportunity to provide additional resources and dollars to help move PGW forward. We've had a lot of different conversations and discussions regarding some of the ideas that came out of the diversification study. To me, the goal of this conversation is to continue that dialogue, and there's been other movement that's been happening within PGW to look at these opportunities going forward, as well as some other organizations that I think will help us, principally with the geothermal initiative, to help PGW move forward into that perspective. So I thank you all for your commitment, investment of the most precious resource that you have, which is time, to this issue as we continue this conversation. So thank you all for being here for this conversation as we move forward with this morning's hearing. With that, Mr. Iannuzzi, can you then please call our first witness we have this morning for Resolution 210653?
Senator Nikhil Sabal.
Senator Sabal, thank you for being with us this morning. I know you have a lot of resources at the Commonwealth level, and hopefully you'll bring some of those resources here to Philadelphia. I know you're working on that in spite of some of the challenges you're dealing with other members of the General Assembly.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are indeed working. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all. So thank you to the members, council members. Thank you to the members of the Finance and Transportation and Public Utilities Committee. It is a pleasure to be here with you all. Thank you so much for the invitation to be part of this. As you know, my district lies entirely within Philadelphia County, and my work to meet the needs of Philadelphia residents directly intersects with yours. And I'm always grateful for opportunities to collaborate. Specific to this morning, thinking critically on the future of PGW provides us with a wholly unique opportunity to think toward deliberate action to build the world Philadelphia residents want, the world Philadelphia residents need. For years, Philadelphia has had the heartbreaking distinction of being one of the poorest big cities in the United States. Nearly a quarter of our residents living in poverty. As representatives elected to represent our people and our communities, I know this to be a fact, of course, of which you are all deeply aware, and that you are committed to changing. I stand with you in the work of building communities in which all our residents have what they need to thrive. And I'm glad to be here to discuss my current initiative towards this end, which is passing the Whole Home Repairs Act. Our Commonwealth has some of the oldest housing stock in the nation. More than 280,000 occupied units in the Commonwealth have moderate to severe physical inadequacies, including leaky roofs or windows, blown fuses or exposed wiring, unreliable heat, or even the lack of a flushing toilet. These deferred maintenance issues endanger the health of the home's residents, including through exposure to mold and lead. And these older homes are notoriously hard to keep warm in the winter and cool in the summer, with extreme temperatures putting residents at additional risk while simultaneously burdening them with crushing utility bills. In Philadelphia, we know that low-income households spend an average of 23% of their incomes on utility bills, while nearly 3/4 of low to moderate income households who apply for home repair loans are denied by conventional lenders, keeping residents trapped. And our city is not an outlier. Across Pennsylvania, residents are struggling with increased extreme weather events exacerbating the pace of the deterioration of our homes. Our housing crisis, in other words, and our climate crisis are inextricable. The fight for affordable utilities, the fight for safe communities, the fight for housing security, and the fight for equity and justice in our systems are all the same fight. This is the genesis of the Whole Home Repairs Act, a sweeping bipartisan bill that I introduced to establish a one-stop shop for home repairs and weatherization while creating new family-sustaining jobs in a growing field. This bill is the first of its kind in the nation, allowing Pennsylvanians to stay warm, safe, and dry in homes they can afford, and providing communities with the means to fight the devastating effects of displacement, instability, and blight all at once. In short, the goal of the Whole Home Repairs Act is to make our communities resilient. It works by doing three things. It funds habitability repairs and energy efficiency updates for homes throughout Pennsylvania by providing homeowners and small landlords with up to $50,000 to repair their homes. It funds support staff to help people access the assistance they need in the order in which they need it, maximizing the amount of funding they can get for their homes. Finally, it funds training programs and provides stipends to trainees to build up a local workforce needed to meet the growing demand for labor, and by doing so, it will ensure the creation of new jobs for our residents. This bill will benefit hundreds of thousands of Pennsylvania residents, including many who live right here in our city. I know that each and every city council member rejects poverty as a defining characteristic of our city. And to change this paradigm, we must take bold action. We need investment in our communities. We need money with no strings attached to go to low-income households to alleviate their energy burdens and make their homes safe to live in, not burden them with more debt. We can push back against poverty by infusing our communities with the funding they need to become resilient. People across the country are struggling under the protracted hardships of the pandemic, and Pennsylvania can be a national leader in helping our residents recover. We can fix our homes, and we can build our local workforce and create new jobs while we do it. We can permanently move the needle on our affordable housing crisis and our climate crisis. The Whole Home Repairs Act makes this possible. I want to acknowledge, in concluding here, Council members Gilmore Richardson and Parker, who introduced the resolution for Philadelphia's support for the Whole Home Repairs Act, and I extend my deep and sincere gratitude to all of City Council for passing this resolution. I also want to acknowledge your leadership, Mr. Chairman, in your support of Philadelphia Energy Authority's Built to Last program, on which my bill has been modeled. Your leadership and support have been invaluable. I look forward to the work we'll do together to fight housing insecurity, to fight environmental and climate injustice, and to fight against the systems that have kept Philadelphians locked in generational poverty. I welcome any questions that you have on this bill and on this work. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Senator Sabal. I also want to note for the record that Councilmember Maria Kiona Sanchez is also with us, and you must have been reading my notes because my question to you was in reference to Built to Last, and the initiative that we've been doing here in the city of Philadelphia with Philadelphia Energy Authority, which really was an initiative to how do we take all the various programs that we have in the city of Philadelphia, and from a constituent, they may qualify for BSRP or heater hotline or LIHEAP, but they may have other issues in their home that also needs to be addressed. And so the Built to Last program was an initiative to try to bundle all those various programs, but also bring in some additional dollars. And Senator Casey also provided some significant dollars for the Energy Authority to really get Built to Last up and running. I guess my question is, from Built to Last to what you're doing with your initiative and legislation, how will that help and how will those programs work together collectively here in Philadelphia?
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a very good question. I think, we have essentially, as I mentioned, the Whole Home Repairs Act is very much inspired by the model of Built to Last. So again, thank you for your leadership on that. And to the Philadelphia Energy Authority, which is supportive of the legislation. What our bill would do is essentially scale up both the initiatives that we have in Philadelphia and, of course, extend them across the state where they're more or less unavailable to the degree that we even have, support here in Philadelphia. So the State Whole Home Repairs Act would offer a significant additional funding source for basic systems repair, would actually make it more money available. It would also extend the program to low-income and moderate-income tenants, which is not currently available. So landlords would be small to landlords would have access to this money in the form of a forgivable loan, which would be contingent on some affordability restrictions, but it would be per $50,000 per tenant. So Philadelphia Energy Authority, we've spoken with them about the legislation. They believe they can sort of layer on some of their further initiatives around reducing energy burdens, around making it possible, for example, for some to replace older heaters, to replace knob and tube wiring, etc. In addition to all the coordination that we want to do. They sort of imagine that this would be able to allow them to sort of scale up the program as they currently have it. So, basically this would provide a significant additional boost in funding, allow us to do many more houses and at a scale that we currently are not able to do it for homeowners as well as for tenants.
Yeah, one of the aspects of this conversation regarding diversification is that we need to make people's homes more sustainable, so they have a lesser need for energy. And I think your legislation, along with Built to Last, is one significant step in that regard. Have there been other jurisdictions around the Commonwealth that are familiar with this legislation that could be supportive? I'm thinking of the fact that, through my term as president of Pennsylvania Municipal League, there are a number of cities around the Commonwealth, and I'm thinking of Mayor Paige Cognetti in Scranton, or Denise Shirachi in Lancaster, or Mayor Derek Slaughter in Williamsport. All are cities that are smaller in size than the city of Philadelphia, but many of the cities in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania are third-class cities that have roughly about 100,000 residents, but have a lot of the same similar issues that we have in Philadelphia with very, very old housing stock, and many citizens who are moderate to low income who may not have the resources to make their home more sustainable, to look at ways of diversifying the energy that they're using. So has there been any outreach from your understanding? I know this legislation is bipartisan, so hopefully that's also getting the word out to those cities about how they can be supportive and maybe pass a resolution like we've done in Philadelphia to support your legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That it's an excellent point, and I think it would be very welcome. So I'll just mention that in launching the legislation, we did travel to a sort of roadshow for whole home repairs. We went to Reading, Lancaster, Allentown, in addition to Philadelphia, and we have we have support in those areas from a number of different kind of organizations, groups, residents, and the like. But in addition, among the kind of bipartisans, among the legislators in the General Assembly who have supported this legislation, represent some of the very cities that you're talking about. So, for example, Senator Patrick Brown, who represents Allentown, who's also the majority chairman of the Appropriations Committee, was the first Republican to sign on in support of the legislation. Senator Dan Laughlin, who represents Erie County, and of course the city of Erie, also supported this legislation. Senator Elder Vogel, who represents parts of western Pennsylvania, a number of smaller townships and boroughs out there. And Senator David Argall, who actually has worked on this. It represents Schuylkill County, but has worked on this across the state, these issues of this kind also supportive of this. So we have a lot of the kind of legislators who are supportive of this issue. But you're quite right; it would actually be in addition to the support in the General Assembly, having councils and the like, city councils following the lead of Philadelphia would be welcome. We have had some outreach from the administration in Scranton, and we've had outreach from, for example, the Meadville City Council in Crawford County. So there is interest, and I think it would be welcome. We would be love to pursue that and think that through that with you in terms of eliciting support and resolutions from those councils. So I think it's a very good idea.
Well, thank you. And what I will do is at our next executive committee meeting, which will be in May, I'll bring this up to the Pennsylvania Municipal League to see if we can get the league to be supportive of your legislation, especially considering that some of the mayors of our executive committee are mayors of cities that you've already visited. So we will move forward in that regard. I'd like to recognize Councilmember Jones for comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to our esteemed panelists. I do own a suit, but it is my annual Block Captain's Boot Camp, and I will be required to do duties such as unpacking tables. So I wanted to be a part of this nonetheless. I want to first recognize our chairman for his work as within the Gas Commission and being very focused on how we move the entity into the future. He was a part of the work to prevent privatization of the facility way back now. But as we move forward, we went from the preferable fossil fuel to, we've evolved to, well, maybe we should look at other alternatives. I just want to know, in light of the global marketplace, with Russia cutting off Europe and other areas with natural gas, what does that do, and how does that pressure production domestically? And what will, I've noticed by way of production of oil, environmentalists took a back seat to the pressures of keeping gas prices down. Do you anticipate any similar actions when it comes to natural gas?
Councilmember, is that question for me? Addressed to?
It's for whoever has the foresight to answer.
Well, just speaking to the one of the things that in the legislation that we are considering, I think we want to reduce energy use across the board. So we would want to, the Whole Home Repairs Act in particular, again following kind of the model that we have started to establish here in Philadelphia, would just reduce energy burdens, especially in particular for low to moderate income homeowners and tenants across the board. So reliance on gas altogether, or reliance on for example, many people may not even have access to gas heaters and may be using space heaters and the like. So I think that we have, which is itself potentially very dangerous, not an efficient way to heat your home, can often result in high electricity bills and the like. We want to reduce energy burdens across the board. So I think that has, that is good for the climate, that is good for low to moderate income homeowners, and that is good, in sort of geopolitical terms as well. I think that, all of this across the board, we want to be reducing our energy use, our energy burdens, most of all because people are struggling to pay their bills, and I think that our initiative would play a major role in accomplishing that.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Councilmember Jones, did you have a follow-up?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to get that I understand the micro and the macro. The less we use at the urban and at-risk levels, the more we keep people in homes. Energy utility bills will make you as homeless as not paying your mortgage. I get it. But as we look to the future, we have to look as well globally to see if there is going to be a greater demand worldwide and what that does to us.
Thank you, Councilmember Jones. And I think there are some other panelists that, when they have a chance to speak, may also be able to touch on the question that you presented during their presentation, during their panel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Are there other questions from members of council for Senator Zaval? Seeing none, I also like to note for the record that Councilmember David O is also present for this hearing. So thank you, Councilmember O. Senator Zaval, thank you for your work and leadership. This initiative that you're doing is very important because as we're looking to not only diversify PGW, the opportunity for other constituents around the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to have a more sustainable home is important, and the work you're doing with your legislation will make that happen, so that way they will be using less energy and will have a better opportunity to diversify their own energy, even though it may not be coming from PGW. So thank you for your leadership. Look forward to working with you and getting support for your legislation through the Pennsylvania Municipal League. So thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, council members, for your time. Looking forward to working with all of you. Thank you again.
That's good. Thank you. Mr. Iannuzzi, could you call the next panel witnesses to testify regarding the resolution?
Bishop Dwayne Royster, Peter Winslow, Steve Luxton, Kentasha Scott.
Thank you, all of you, for being here this morning, and we will proceed in that order with Bishop Royster. If you could just state your name for the record and then proceed with your testimony.
Yes, my name is Bishop Dwayne Royster, the Executive Director of Power in present here with us today, as well as the citizens of Philadelphia. I'm Bishop Dwayne Royster, Executive Director of Power Interfaith, the state of Pennsylvania's largest faith-based organizing movement. Power is a multiracial, multi-faith, multi-issue organizing movement working for racial and economic justice on a livable planet. We were founded and are still deeply rooted to this date in the city of Philadelphia. The members of and the leaders of Power have a PGW Just Transition strategy team that have been working with allies across the city to win policies that turn PGW into a company that provides heating and cooling without the use of fossil fuels at a pace that matches the urgency of the climate crisis, guarantees all Philadelphians the energy they need at rates they can afford, protects the public health, preserves and creates good union jobs. At the same time, we're working to guarantee everyone healthy, affordable homes. Senator Zaval's Whole Homes Repair Act is a key part of that effort, and we are part of the coalition that is working to pass that bill. We've often been told that we need to choose between essential needs, that we can ensure affordability and enact a rapid shift from fossil fuels to renewable energy at the same time, or that we can't protect workers while averting climate catastrophe. We reject those false choices. We can and must establish policies that accomplish all of these goals. The crisis we face here in the city of Philadelphia, poverty, violence, unaffordable energy bills, asthma, accelerating climate change, and so much more are interrelated. All of these challenges can present us with a sense of hopelessness. But as my good friend, the Reverend Alvin Herring said, his mama told him, when you show up like hope, people will give you their hopelessness. We need comprehensive solutions that show up like hope. 25 years ago, when I bought my first house here in the city of Philadelphia, the 5600 block of Wyalusing Avenue in West Philadelphia in Councilman Jones's district, I bought the 2.5-story row house that was in the middle of the block. And I was so proud at the time of my mid-20s buying my very first house. I was so excited. 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms in the house, things that you often don't see in houses in Philadelphia. But the challenge came that winter. I bought the house in the summer. Challenge came that winter when I got my first PGW bill. That was 2.5 times the size of my mortgage. if I told you that my first bill in 1995 was $800 because of the house that was built in 1865 that was not weatherized, didn't have the things that it needed. I began, as a result of that process, over the course of the next few years while I lived and owned that house, struggled financially to be able to keep up with the utility payments and maintaining the house at the same time. There were times when the utilities were actually cut off because we could not afford the bills to be able to maintain that. The challenge is that folk are still dealing with those same issues in Philadelphia today. Some almost 30 years later, I should have to do better with my math, some 30 years later, folk are still struggling with those same issues. We are seeking investments that make life better for the working class majority, especially African American, Latinx, Asian Pacific Islanders, indigenous folk, biracial folk, who are harmed most by current policies, while protecting a livable climate. We're aiming to build a healthier, safer city with affordable energy bills, comfortable homes, more good jobs, and we're not asking our city to sacrifice for the sake of the planet. The fact that PGW is publicly owned gives us a huge opportunity, and we must take it. We appreciate the PGW Business Diversification Study published in December, but it falls far short of outlining clear pathways for transforming the utility. It's almost as if we're afraid to transform the utility. We need a comprehensive, transparent process for planning PGW's future as we do for Philadelphia's future. And we need you, City Council, to mandate through legislation that PGW's budgets and business plans match the city's climate goals. On the way to that longer-term objective, we bring a couple of urgent requests to you today. First, we need your immediate action to advance the most promising option for PGW that is identified in the Business Diversification Report: thermal networks, also known as network geothermal heating and cooling systems. By building and operating electric-powered thermal network systems, PGW can provide affordable heating and cooling without fossil fuels and preserve good union jobs. Let me just say this again. You can provide affordable heating and cooling without fossil fuels and preserve good union jobs. Now, we recognize this is not a complete solution, but it holds a great deal of promise, and we need to get moving on it now. We know how things take sometimes years, decades, to be able to come to fruition. We need to make sure that we start doing this today. Secondly, we need to begin planning thermal network pilot projects as soon as possible, and we need to ensure that the planning is done in a transparent, participatory manner. The only way City Council can ensure that happens is by requiring that the necessary funds be allocated specifically for these purposes. Third, in June, Council will vote on an ordinance to approve PGW's financial year 2023 capital budget. As a part of that ordinance, Power and 33 other organizations are asking Council to require PGW to allocate $500,000 to advance engineering work that is needed to plan thermal network pilot projects. We're looking forward to talking more with Council members about this request in the weeks to come. And fourth, we do not support the other projects named in the Business Diversification Report. We ask that Council not support on-bill financing for weatherizing low-income residents' homes, though, of course, weatherization is extremely important. That's why we support Senator Saval's bill. And we do not support pilot projects that advance the use of renewable natural gas in PGW's network. These are false solutions, and you'll hear more from other speakers about this today. We need transparency and accountability from PGW and democratic participation in PGW's governance. Though PGW is a public company owned 100% by Philadelphia and therefore owned 100% by Philadelphians, managers fail to provide essential information and seek to exclude the public from participating in decisions. It's important for all council members to know that PGW has just again asked the Philadelphia Gas Commission to change its budget review process to block interveners like Power from cross-examining PGW witnesses and requesting documents from PGW. PGW made a similar attempt to block Power from fully participating in the capital budget review process earlier this year. These attempts by PGW to fight transparency and public participation are unacceptable. Secondly, the city should clearly and unambiguously instruct PGW to stop trying to restrict public participation in its budget proceedings and to welcome it instead, because navigating a just transition for PGW will take all of us to be able to make it happen. This is a critical moment. In key speeches in the 1960s, Dr. King constantly invoked this theme of the fierce urgency of now. That phrase applies here in 2022. The climate crisis is intensifying, and those who have the least wealth and power are harmed the most. Now is the moment for fierce urgency, and we are counting on your leadership to do the right thing. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to come and share this day.
Thank you, Bishop Royster, for your testimony and being so personal in providing that information. That's something that many citizens in the city of Philadelphia are dealing with. We're going to hear from all the witnesses, and then we'll have council members ask questions, and we'll acknowledge Councilmember Bass as the first question from members of council. Peter Winslow, then Steve Luxton, and then Kenesha Scott. Mr. Winslow, you are muted.
Can you hear me now, Chairman Green?
We can hear you. Thank you.
My name is Peter Winslow, Peterwinslow. I'm a resident of Northwest Philadelphia. Thank you, Chairman Green, and members of the Joint Committee for this opportunity to speak with you regarding sustainability and diversification with respect to the Philadelphia Gas Works. I appreciate and thoroughly endorse the comments that have been made by Council members Gim, Green, and Jones, by Senator Saval, and by Bishop Royster. I'll do my best not to be repetitive. Today, I'll leave to others discussion of the opportunities provided by geothermal and other technologies. Instead, I'll focus on diversification of PGW business models and on sustainability. For PGW as a business, for Philadelphians as PGW customers, and for society overall in response to climate disruption. I will offer 3 specific suggestions for your consideration. One Rivet is a Virginia-based consulting firm. One Rivet worked with the PGW executive and senior management team to develop a new mission and vision statements for the company. The newly defined mission is to, quote, enhance the quality of life and promote business development in our community by meeting Philadelphia's energy needs, unquote. Thank you, PGW. Meeting Philadelphia's energy needs. That's succinct. Congratulations, PGW. With the help of One Rivet, you have crafted a mission statement to motivate your employees, elevate your customers, and inform your strategic thinking. So here's the new vision. To, quote, provide a pathway to a thriving and cleaner future through innovative energy solutions, close quote. Thanks again. The new vision statement describes the transition from reliance on fossil fuels that the environmental justice community is demanding. Since we all share the values that underlie these new statements of mission and vision for PGW, we should now be collaborating to analyze our problems, to explore our opportunities, to find mutually agreed upon solutions. So why does the environmental justice community feel that this conversation is confrontational rather than collaborative? Why is PGW resisting rather than leading changes and innovations? Why isn't PGW more transparent and more forthcoming in sharing information with the public? Why does PGW lobby Harrisburg to preempt the city when the city is PGW's owner? Perhaps the reason is that PGW has not yet embraced the new mission and vision statements. Indeed, PGW clings to its old mission to be, quote, a financially viable enterprise providing safe, reliable, natural gas service, unquote. PGW puts itself, instead of our community, at the center of its mission. In fact, people, customers, the needs of Philadelphia are not even mentioned. In similar fashion, the old vision is to be, quote, the industry leader in customer service and operational excellence, unquote. Again, PGW is self-referential. Furthermore, PGW views itself in relation to its industry peers rather than to Philadelphians. Google PGW mission statement or vision statement and you get the old versions. Search the PGW website for mission statement or vision statement and you get nothing. PGW promotes itself as an environmental steward and an energy access advocate, committed to contributing to a clean climate and minimizing its overall carbon footprint. But the product PGW sells is methane, a potent greenhouse gas. As long as PGW is a purveyor of fossil fuels, it will be exacerbating the climate problem, not contributing to the climate solution. Parroting gas industry propaganda, PGW describes gas as a bridge fuel. If there is a bridge, what is on the other side? What off-ramp is PGW building? Until PGW decides to help create a future in which Philadelphians are not dependent on the use of fossil fuels, PGW messaging will seem fundamentally inconsistent, frequently incoherent, and often disingenuous. PGW needs to end its ambivalence concerning its identity and purpose. So my first suggestion is adopt the new mission and vision statements. Note that unlike the old version, the new mission statement doesn't use the word gas. So my second suggestion is remove the word gas from the PGW name. Keep the G and the logo. Hold a contest for Philadelphians to offer and then vote on a replacement name like Philadelphia's Greatest Workplace, or simply leave the initials as in PGW Energy Services. The cost of these two changes will be insignificant. The benefits of these two changes will be substantial. The implications of these two changes will be profound. As a business, PGW is currently product-driven. The product that drives PGW is gas. PGW derives its revenue from the sale of a single product. The old vision is limited to the sale of gas with the goal of remaining a financially viable enterprise. And financial viability is assured by the rate structure approved by the Pennsylvania Public Utilities Commission. PGW is a quasi-monopoly. PGW is not a complete monopoly because the Pennsylvania's Gas Choice Program allows customers to choose a natural gas supplier other than PGW. But like PGW, all the gas suppliers approved by the PUC are using the same product-driven business model. As a marketing strategy to retain and retain customers, PGW provides Energy Sense programs, rebates, and financial incentives. Replacement of building heating and water heating equipment, installation of smart thermostats and roof insulation, weatherization, and other energy conservation measures are part of the value proposition PGW promotes to its customers. Irrespective of societal desirability of these measures, within the context of understanding the PGW business model, their purpose is to maintain the base of customers who consume their gas product. So my third suggestion is develop new business models based on meeting Philadelphia's energy needs through innovative energy solutions. Once PGW becomes mission-driven rather than product-driven, energy efficiency and renewable energy will be the means to provide PGW customers with the heating, cooling, cooking, and other services that enhance the quality of life in our community. Instead of remaining a marketing tool, energy efficiency will become a revenue source. The kind of sustainable business model that PGW could adapt is provided by the metered energy efficiency transaction structure called MEETS. MEETS was designed to directly address the utility death spiral that PGW is already in. Falling unit sales lead to increased rates that are needed to cover fixed costs. Higher prices make gas unaffordable for lower income people and drive away customers to lower cost alternatives, leading to further loss of unit sales. The death spiral makes the current PGW business model unsustainable. In a similar way, network geothermal and community PV solar systems offer opportunities to employ business models that monetize renewable energy. From an economic perspective, employing these technologies results in turning the uncontrollable variable cost of fuel paid for over time into the identified fixed cost of equipment paid for upfront with financing that can be amortized. For PGW to transition from being a purveyor of fossil fuels to becoming a provider of energy efficiency and renewable energy, PGW will need to develop and transition to new business models. PGW should be planning this transition now. PGW needs to study implementation strategies, not feasibility. PGW needs to conduct pilot projects, not demonstration projects. Transition will require substantial investment. PGW is not a financial institution. PGW cannot finance its transition on its own. The Whole Home Repair Act proposed by Senator Saval can help weatherize our homes and ensure that our row house roofs can safely carry the load of photovoltaic solar panels. The building energy performance policies developed by our Office of Sustainability can point the way toward energy efficiency. Federal programs for the Department of Housing and Urban Development and other programs can help. Moreover, investments in energy efficiency and renewable energy pay for themselves over time. Consumers save money, provided money is available to make the investments. Well, where will PGW and its customers obtain the money needed to effectuate the transition? Well, you, our City Council, brought the Philadelphia Public Financial Authority into existence on March 17th. You're currently in the process of proposing people from community stakeholder groups for Mayor Kenny to appoint as members of the board for the Financial Authority. You're currently in the process of providing funds in the next city budget for that board to start up the Financial Authority, $3 million to become self-sustaining. You'll be authorizing the capitalization of the Financial Authority, $75 million to seed programs that will fill gaps in the availability of credit and promote a fairer financial ecosystem for Philadelphians. PGW should partner with the new Financial Authority, together with the Philadelphia Energy Authority and its affiliate, the Philadelphia Green Capital Corp., and along with the many other institutions that are dedicated to the vitality of our city, we have ample capacity to finance the PGW transition. Does the City Council, the Gas Commission, the Philadelphia Facilities Management Corporation, and the PGW executive team have the foresight and courage to join the people of Philadelphia in creating a pathway to a thriving and cleaner future through innovative energy solutions? If you do, I suggest PGW start without further delay by taking 3 simple steps. 1, embrace your new mission and vision statements. 2, cease being a gas company. 3, begin the transition. Thank you for your consideration of my suggestions.
You're muted, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry. The next panel, next witnesses, I'm sorry, is Steve Luxon and then Kenesha Scott.
Good morning, Chairman Green, council members, colleagues, attendees. I'm the CEO of ECA, and we are this unique entity in the city of Philadelphia in that we provide multiple services primarily to the low to moderate income communities in Philadelphia. And we've been doing that for 38 years. I personally have been in low-income residential energy efficiency for 27 years. I've worked all over the country and worked in many energy efficiency programs and have also developed energy audit software. So I'm very proud to say I'm a building scientist in addition to the leader of ECA. And as a result, ECA will typically get into or touch about 6,000 low-income households annually in the city of Philadelphia. We run the heater hotline, which is a program that will allow us to fix a heater for a low-income family that cannot afford to hire a contractor, and we will repair it. And if we can't repair it, then we will do our best to get them into the federally funded program through the Department of Health and Human Services, LIHEAP Crisis. And that program allows us to replace heating systems as well. So in a typical year, ECA will replace upwards of 800 to 1,000 heating systems. We're also the sole weatherization provider in the state of Delaware as well. So our experience is most likely unparalleled when it comes to expertise in a low-income household in terms of its physical condition. So my main thrust here is to...
Mr. Luxton, hold on one second. Anyone that's not speaking, please put your microphone on mute. Only person that should have their microphone open is Mr. Luxton. Everyone else should be muted. Please proceed, sir.
Okay. So given the extensive experience I and ECA have in low-income households, we identified a long time ago that most of these homes that we perform work in, whether it be fixing a heating system and or making the home more energy efficient in an effort to reduce the extremely high energy burden in Philadelphia of 23%, we recognize that home repair has to be built into these programs. These homes, as I said, need more than insulation and caulking and so on. They need home repair. Philadelphia is estimated has 330,000 row homes, and virtually every one of those homes has a flat roof. And flat roofs are conducive to water infiltration, unfortunately, because water is allowed to sit on them and then infiltrate. And because of the lack of attics, most folks don't know they have a roof leak until it finally reveals itself in the form of a big water stain somewhere in the ceiling or in a wall in the home. And at that point, damage has already happened in terms of creating potential mold, wood decay, mildew, etc. And aside from the BSRP program, there really is no other opportunity for folks to get their home repaired. So ECA created the Energy Fit Philly program about 10 years ago, and essentially the concept is exactly what Built to Last was modeled on, which then in turn went to the Whole Home Repairs Act, which is just a holistic approach to low-income houses, not only making them more energy efficient, but also making them safe, warm, comfortable, and most importantly, habitable in an effort to preserve home ownership in the city of Philadelphia. We're seeing very aggressive, robust gentrification, which from one side of the fence is a great thing to see, right? Revitalization in the city. But there are many communities that do not want to move. And these homes are the ones that we're most interested in investing in to make sure that we can make their homes affordable and livable as well. So I don't have any long-winded pitch here against taking fossil fuel out of homes. I would put myself as an expert when it comes to energy efficiency in a residential home. And gas is right now the most economical fossil fuel. And ECA has aggressively, as we weatherize and put heating systems in homes, we have pushed hard to minimize waste. So we put in the most efficient heating systems. We today, for example, heating systems that are gas-fired can be as efficient as 97% efficient. There's still carbon that is being emitted, but significantly less than the heaters that most of us grew up with in our homes. So the technology has increased dramatically, and we're not right now jumping on the bandwagon to electrify all of these homes because of the fact that the infrastructure really isn't there. Electrification of a home entails not only changing out all the fossil fuel systems in that particular home, but we also have to increase the electric size in that house to accommodate now an electric load that essentially doubles what just about every home in Philadelphia has. That's a significant cost, in addition to the electrification of the appliances as well. So I would, as I've been speaking with many of my colleagues about the decarbonization, electrification movement, I try to keep things where we can keep track of what we're doing and maintain costs. So we're not just simply flipping a switch and making a house go all electric. We are doing our best to lessen energy loads in houses, and that's really within our grasp. Anything beyond that is really why we're testifying today on behalf of the Joint Finance Transportation Public Utility Committees to share our experience with the thousands of households that ECA does serve every year, and our experience and what we see as well. With that, I appreciate your time and consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Luxton. Ms. Scott.
Good morning, Chairperson Green, members of the Joint Finance and Transportation and Public Utilities Committee, fellow community members, and panelists. My name is Kintasia Scott. I'm an attorney in the Energy Unit at Community Legal Services and would like to offer some brief comments. The Energy Unit at Community Legal Services advocates to ensure that Philadelphia households have access to affordable water, heat, and electricity in their homes. CLS's Energy Unit serves several important roles regarding PGW. First, we serve as public advocate, representing the interests of PGW's residential customers in matters before the Philadelphia Gas Commission. And we represent individual low-income utility customers in affording, restoring, and maintaining gas service. Finally, we represent groups of customers seeking improvements to programs and policies that benefit low-income PGW customers. My colleague Jolene Price testified more extensively at the previous hearing, and I won't repeat her comments, but I will quickly offer some of the high points. We continue to be concerned about the unaffordability being faced by PGW's customers, and that PGW continues to put up barriers that limit customers' ability to restore or start service, enroll in bill assistance, and access programs that are statutorily mandated to benefit low-income customers. Further, we urge the city and PGW to utilize all available resources to provide free home repair, weatherization, and energy efficiency to low and moderate income homeowners and tenants. As for PGW's diversification study itself, we are disappointed that one of the identified pilot proposals is a weatherization program with novel financing opportunities, which suggests that PGW would provide loans and/or other ways of financing weatherization applications for low and moderate income customers. We believe that these programs should be free. As low-income consumer advocates, we are not in favor of on-bill financing, tariffed on-bill financing, or any novel financing opportunities associated with any weatherization programs that PGW might offer low and moderate income PGW customers. We believe that these mechanisms will not diversify PGW, but aim to further tie customers financially to the company. Low and moderate income ratepayers cannot afford additional fixed costs to be added to their PGW bills. As we think about the future of PGW and take into consideration the interests that have been shared by the various ratepayers, community groups, and other interested stakeholders who have been involved throughout this entire process, we urge PGW to take into consideration options that not only serve the company, but all of the ratepayers whom it serves. Thank you for your consideration of this testimony.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. I know Councilmember Bass had a question, and then if there's any other questions from members of council for this panel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a quick question. Number one, I want to thank everyone for their testimony today, and I think that we're all recognizing and understanding that things have to be done differently, not only for the sake of our planet, but also because what we have is really, it's not helpful to particularly low-income ratepayers who are struggling every single month to pay utility bills. And that's not just, actually, I'm going to say it's not just low income, it's middle income folks as well who have a very difficult time. If you get a bill in the mail, and it's not unheard of. I forgot who mentioned, I think it was Bishop Royster who mentioned getting a $750 bill. I see Councilman Green nodding his head. We live in the same neighborhood, similar housing, so I know that those bills, they tend to go through the roof. So we have to do some things differently. But I had just a really quick question for Bishop Royster. You mentioned something about, and I forgive me because I didn't catch all of it, but you mentioned something about weatherization that we should not. Did I hear you say we should not do weatherization, or did I hear that wrong? Or
No. What I was saying was that there is a piece in the business diversification report that talks about on-bill financing for weatherizing low-income residents' home, and we're saying that we don't necessarily support that. One, because it's also charging the citizens for the weatherization, and we know that many of the citizens of Philadelphia can't afford the weatherization, which is why Senator Saval has his bill out there right now. We said weatherization is extremely important. Let me just be clear. And I said that in my statement. Weatherization is completely important. But we also recognize that it's just adding an additional burden to the citizens of Philadelphia that many are unable to afford. And so we're actually going to be creating a deep classification between those that can afford to weatherize and those that can't. We need a system like the Built the Last program that Council Member Green talked about, like the weatherization home repair process that Senator Saval talked about, and we need not to continue to try to pass these on to the customers of the PGW.
I understand. Okay, I'm sorry, I just wasn't exactly clear as to where you were going with that. But thank you so much. I think okay, yeah, we all want weatherization. I mean, no need to, basically have your heat on and essentially have a window open without having the weatherization in place to help make homes energy efficient. So, thank you. I just really wanted clarification on that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember Bass. And I think the comments that Bishop Royster made were echoed by Ms. Scott. Just the concerns of having the cost of that weatherization placed onto homeowners, many who are moderate to low income, who are struggling with significant gas bills, even though, as Bishop Royster, Ms. Scott, and others have said, weatherization is incredibly important, especially as we seek to diversify. We need to weatherize and make homes more sustainable so people use less energy. So that's part of the conversation. So thank you, Councilmember Bass, for that point to additionally clarify that information for those who are listening and as we continue the conversation. I want to thank this panel for being here this morning. Mr. Iannuzzi, if you could give us the names for the next list of speakers for this resolution.
Ashita Gona, Mark Kleindina, Nicholas Pevner, and Edward Yim.
Thank you all for being here this morning. We will start with Ms. Gona and proceed in that fashion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Chairman Green and members of the Joint Committee. My name is Ashita Gona, and I'm an associate at RMI, an independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization whose mission it is to transform the global energy system to secure a clean, prosperous, and zero-carbon future for all. Electrification was discussed at length in the diversification study to decarbonize end uses in Philadelphia and as a potential alternative business model for PGW. And so today, we're going to explore 4 opportunities toward electrification Philadelphia could consider, particularly for low-income ratepayers. First, Philadelphia can move every home, and especially low-income homes, toward decarbonization without deepening reliance on fossil fuels. Philadelphia has several programs that provide housing and energy resources to low-income households every day, including the Basic System Repairs Program, Solarize Philly, and the Heater Hotline. The city can leverage these existing programs and networks to implement measures that move homes toward electrification, like pre-electrification assessments, panel and wiring upgrades, and rooftop solar. Second of all, there are emerging pathways to electrifying low-income households while lowering their energy bills. RMI's recent research suggests a starting point. We conducted energy modeling on a typical old Philadelphia row home and looked at the bill impacts of various electrification interventions. We developed a row home model based on real observed conditions from a local low-income weatherization provider. It's actually a couple. Our results indicate that if gas equipment is nearing end of life, customers could pay lower energy bills by pairing weatherization with air source heat pumps, which are electrified appliances that efficiently provide both heating and cooling. An upgrade package that includes weatherization, heat pumps, and also rooftop solar could reduce operating costs by 25% for consumers. Third, we want to mention that low-income rates should be enhanced to support electrification. An option is percent of income programs for low and moderate income customers, in which rates are capped at an affordable percentage of income. Fourth, the health benefits of electrification should be factored into decision-making. Heat pumps provide both heating and cooling, protecting against heat and cold-related illnesses, and can improve indoor and outdoor air quality. These are important considerations. This hearing is not only an opportunity to focus on reducing gas use and planning PGW's future, but a chance to strive for a well-rounded solution that improves the lives of Philadelphians. It is imperative that Philadelphia and PGW find pathways toward electrification and create an environment in which electrification is accessible to all. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you for your testimony, which is Professor Klangina, and then Professor Pesner and Mr. Yim. I believe you are muted. If you could take yourself off mute.
How's that?
We can hear you now. Thank you.
Excellent. Good morning, and thank you very much for your time to discuss the necessary thermal energy transition. My background in the energy industry dates back to 1988 when I was exposed to natural gas take-or-pay contracts during my graduate studies. I have 34 years of continuous and progressive experience in the energy industry ever since. I've worked for consultants, gas utilities, end users, and brokers over that period. My work as a natural gas supply manager during the coldest winter day on record, as well as a natural gas industry executive, significantly informs my testimony today. I'm currently a professor at Penn State in the Renewable Energy and Sustainability program there, as well as a full-time energy consultant. The focus of my testimony today will be on the benefits that investing in thermal networks as a business diversification opportunity can provide for PGW and the city. The global events of the past 10 weeks point to the very critical importance of energy network reliability and resilience. Philadelphia is in a very precarious position from a natural gas heating perspective. It relies on a delivery system which is near the end of the national natural gas transmission system. Philadelphia does not have access to significant underground natural gas storage on its system and also relies on liquefied natural gas for reliability in the winter months. Philadelphia city gate prices are among the most volatile in the North American market. What is happening in Europe is not just illustrative of the value of resilience and reliability of energy supplies. It will also significantly affect the cost for natural gas for delivery to Philadelphia as North American natural gas returns to being a global commodity as opposed to the local one it has been for the last decade or so. Decarbonization pathways that do not model this existential commodity risk could severely burden those customers least able to pay over the long run. As an anecdotal illustration, I'll point to three facts. First, long-term natural gas pricing, 5 to 10 years in the future, is at least $1 per MMBTU higher than what was used in the diversification study. Second, Philadelphia Citygate for winter 2022-2023 is now trading at close to $12 per MMBTU. This is double the historical price for Philadelphia futures. This morning, the prompt month natural gas contract is trading at 350% of the level it was trading 2 years ago. To continue to rely on this commodity to heat homes in the winter exposes those least able to react to these changes in the market to ever greater costs. Low-income customers will be the most exposed to this volatility and increased cost. This is a significant economic justice issue. To the extent possible, it becomes ever more incumbent on the city's leadership to empower this transition away from the global natural gas commodity with all the associated risk to a more easily locally controlled and optimized asset like a thermal network. Fossil fuel combustion at the point of demand has been the preferred solution for three reasons. First, economics. Unburdened cost for fossil fuel consumption has been lower than alternatives. Second, fossil fuel is easy to store to meet the volatility of the weather. Third, momentum. Switching to other alternatives is scary because lack of heat is a significant safety issue in the wintertime. Thermal networks work to address each of these reasons for the preference of fossil fuels. First, as we burden the cost for fossil fuels with carbon costs, as well as realize that the cost for natural gas in Philadelphia has risen significantly as the consequences of the European situation, the economics of thermal networks incorporating renewable electricity in ground source heat pumps become compelling. Second, thermal networks are a local and viable form of thermal storage because they allow an almost constant coefficient of performance for heat pumps regardless of the weather. As we build out the technology of thermal networks and do more and more pilot programs, we become much more confident that they can perform during times of high demand. Finland and Denmark rely on district energy for more than 50% of heat during the winter. Moreover, thermal networks offer three important characteristics to Philadelphia that the current thermal combustion system does not. First, localized resiliency, reliability, and affordability, which is not dependent on a global commodity or a North American distribution system. Second, the removal of combustion within buildings, which mitigates or eliminates safety issues and the need to replace leak-prone pipes. Third, a business model which offers benefits all year round, providing more even cash flows to the utility, better access to cooling, and energy peak load reduction, not just in the winter, but also during the summer, and may also enable the current workforce the ability to transition their current training to the labor required to develop and maintain the thermal assets. Thermal networks are also important in the process of decarbonization because if a thermal network were installed in a neighborhood that were decarbonized through the installation of heat pumps, a thermal network would use the latent heat in the heat transfer fluid to serve a ground source heat pump, thereby making the heat pump much more efficient at cold temperatures. This would allow for the complete decarbonization of heating by elimination of combustion in buildings. This option for electrification would significantly reduce the strain on the electric grid during periods of peak usage versus a complete switch over to air source heat pumps. Clearly, the impact on emissions of thermal networks is positive. We know that heat pumps already provide a reduction in emissions of 50% versus natural gas combustion for heating. As a thermal network captures more heat and leads to less waste as well as lower electric peaks, the impact on emissions will be even greater. As the grid becomes ever more reliant on zero carbon generation, the emissions impact is driven ever closer to zero because thermal networks provide carbon-free thermal storage, which is the most difficult part of the fossil fuel transition to solve. Thermal networks do not require deep drilling or hot springs. Some geothermal energy systems do make use of naturally occurring high levels of heat deep below the Earth's surface. You'll hear about that later today from the gentleman from Boise. However, thermal networks can make use of geothermal energy in another way, namely by taking advantage of the fact that much shallower depths, the temperature is a relatively consistent temperature year-round, regardless of the air temperature above the surface, which provides the opportunity for efficient heat exchange I described above. A ground source heat pump is more efficient than an air source heat pump because it uses water that is kept at a constant temperature of around 55 degrees Fahrenheit to transfer heat as opposed to the air, which in the winter can get much colder than 55 degrees. In fact, as temperatures go to levels below 32 degrees, the thermal efficiency of air source heat pumps becomes very low. In contrast, a thermal network allows the thermal efficiency of a ground source heat pump to remain in the range of 500% even at the lowest temperatures. This obviously lowers the carbon footprint of the space heating function for the built environment and has the added benefits of lower electricity costs for the consumer and the lower strain on the electricity grid both in the winter and summer seasons. Moreover, thermal networks provide the significant resiliency to the grid required to meet the cold temperatures experienced in the Northeast. These networks act as a form of thermal storage during these very cold days. Simple air source electrification pathways will not address the significant electric reliability issue. If we are to move to significant electrification of heating, we must ensure deliverability on the coldest days. Studies have been conducted that show a potential winter peak which is triple that of the current summer peak in full heating electrification scenarios. The recent crisis in Texas was not just a failure of supply, but a complete misunderstanding of the load. 61% of all heating in Texas is electric. As temperatures plummeted, air source heat pumps lost their coefficients of performance and helped to collapse the grid. We experience these temperatures every year in the Northeast, not just the 1 in 10 as played out in Texas. Thermal networks would thrive in Philadelphia because Philadelphia has three following conditions: a geographically dense load, a locale with significant heating load, a locale with a variety of heat sources and sinks, including diverse heat sources and sinks in buildings, permissive geological conditions, a nearby body of water, and access to other potential thermal sources like wastewater mains. Philadelphia meets all of these criteria. Philadelphia is uniquely positioned in the Northeast as the only large metropolitan area where the city government controls the water, wastewater, and gas utility. In every other metropolitan area in the Northeast, the use of the size of Philadelphia, gas is provided by an investor-owned utility. As PGW is owned by the city, coordination and alignment in the planning for thermal network, including alignment on decarbonization goals and the use of union labor, is simpler than it would be with an investor-owned gas utility. Moreover, the city has access to the rivers for water as well as access to the ability to return water to the rivers. These advantages position Philadelphia well to take a leadership role on thermal networks. Recommendations. The diversification study finds that thermal networks may provide a viable option for PGW as a new business, since the workforce could transition and the business model could be developed in a similar manner. The study finds that an appropriately designed thermal network pilot meets all the positive criteria which were used to compare diversification pilot opportunities, specifically carbon reduction, growing revenue, and retaining workforce, could be launched within 6 months, testing a new energy application or model, and benefiting low-income customers. I recommend that as a condition of approval of PGW's fiscal year 23 capital budget, which is before you, City Council should instruct PGW to invest in an amount not to exceed $500,000 in undertaking the thermal network advanced engineering work, which is described in my testimony, which is filed in the capital budget proceeding and will be part of my exhibit. City Council should require that PGW meet the standards for transparency, stakeholder participation, and public reporting that I describe in my testimony, including a competitive procurement of a consultant to perform the thermal network advanced engineering work, performance of the thermal network advanced engineering work in collaboration with a working group which includes the parties that participated in the working group for the diversification study, as well as public advocate, Environmental Justice Commission, and any interested community organization, holding public hearings to collect input on the advanced engineering study, and finally producing a public report every 3 months that includes updates on the work performed. To conclude, I strongly recommend that City Council consider investing in the localized energy resilience which can only be offered by thermal networks. It will allow the city to declare energy independence from the volatility of global energy markets as well as the vicissitudes of natural gas pipeline cost recovery. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. We'll now proceed with the next witness.
Hello. Can we see the screen?
Yes, we can see the screen.
Okay, wonderful. Hello, everyone. My name is Nicholas Pevsner. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Landscape Architecture at UPenn in the School of Design. So thank you, Chairman Green, council members. I'm not an engineer. I'm a design professor who happens to study infrastructure. But 5 years ago, I had the privilege of spending time in Boston as an artist in residence at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum on a Mater York Fellowship studying gas infrastructure. I drove around in the city with scientists who are able to measure methane in parts per billion with a hypersensitive piece of equipment, and to make drawings of these situations in the city, including the physical components and the invisible climate impacts of this infrastructure. This was the project. And these were the scientists. I was working directly with the scientists who had done the first ground level inventory of gas leaks in Boston back in 2013. Now, I was not involved with this, but was able to learn a lot from them. This 2013 study was a first of its kind investigation that mapped leaks across the city and found over 3,000 leaks, 3,356 to be precise. So in my work, I was interested to see how gas use in the city is connected to the much larger system of gas infrastructure, from energy generation inside the city to gas processing plants that can flare gas, or worse for the climate, feature quote unquote anomalous venting. And then if we go out along the pipeline network, to the gathering pipelines and fracking sites of Western Pennsylvania and Ohio, where compressors routinely vent methane through both planned and unplanned quote-unquote blowdowns. So in this illustration, it's documenting a state Supreme Court case that uncovered extreme localized pollution from some of these processes, as well as climate atmospheric impacts. And finally, the gas system also includes underground gas storage wells. And my colleagues at the Harvard School of Public Health found that in the Northeast, there are over 2,700 underground gas storage wells that feature single point of failure design, which is vulnerable to a blowout, just like Los Angeles had in the Aliso Canyon blowout. For those of you who remember that, drastically increased the methane emissions of the state of California. So this is a story that lines up with what we know about the larger gas infrastructure system, that leaks happen at every step of the natural gas supply chain, including over 40% of the emissions well upstream of the city. And we probably don't need to be reminded of how harmful methane is in driving climate change. It's in the area of 84 to 86 times or so worse than CO2 if you average it over 20 years. And now it's true that the PGW diversification study assumes that leaky cast iron pipes will be replaced by 2057, not 2050, but that's fine. It also assumes that natural gas could be replaced by decarbonized gas, with the assumption that, and I quote, all decarbonized gases are generally assumed to have a net neutral impact on the climate if gas leakage is prevented, end quote. If gas leakage is prevented. So if renewable natural gas leaks unburned, it's still acting as a hyperpotent greenhouse gas. It's not carbon neutral. It's not climate neutral. As we'll see, eliminating gas leaks will be harder than previously assumed. Now, we don't know precisely how much gas is leaking out of the present Philadelphia system today, but we can be quite confident that it's significantly more than official bottom-up inventory estimates. Last year, if we look at Boston, for example, a study there found that natural gas emissions were approximately 6 times higher than inventory estimates. If we just drill down, where were they coming from? Pipeline emissions should account for about 42% of total methane emissions in the bottom-up inventory. But repairs on the system each year since 2014 were supposed to have shown a 50% decrease in emissions, but the team did not observe any significant change the number of grade 1 or 2 leaks, and only a very slight reduction in the number of grade 3 leaks. So through a bottom-up leak count, as well as their top-down analysis, they concluded that new leaks are appearing in the aging Boston pipeline system as fast as old ones are being repaired. They also note that this is not atypical. This is exactly how many other cities with old natural gas infrastructure also fare. So the research team investigated natural gas emissions in other U.S. cities, including Philadelphia, which you see here, which similarly has roughly 6 times worse inventory as measured directly, as opposed to what is accounted for in bottom-up inventory estimates. They found the same gap between bottom-up EPA emissions estimates and top-down atmospheric measurement prevalent in a number of U.S. cities. And then other studies in Boston have looked at the cost of the repairs of the leaky gas infrastructure. So in Massachusetts, the total costs of gas replacement have been estimated at between $13.4 to about $16.6 billion for the state of Massachusetts. In Philly, I'm not sure of the exact estimate, but if we take the roughly 2,000 miles of gas mains that are considered at risk, times about $1 million per mile for gas main replacement, which PGW has suggested, which, just to note, is about half the cost per mile of some of the actual costs in Boston, which were discovered through information requests from the Massachusetts Attorney General 2 years ago. That comes out to about $2 billion for Philadelphia. So if the pipeline replacement might actually not eliminate more than 50% of leaks, which are probably behind the meter. So those 50% of leaks in the Boston study were found to be coming most likely from boilers, furnaces, other appliances, and likely from compression stations and meters rather than from the pipelines. So if we actually invest this money and 50% of leaks remain unmitigated because they're happening behind the meter or at the compressor station in a system that actually won't be carbon neutral by 2050, then what are we doing? You've heard much about the concept of network geothermal or ground source systems, which are currently being piloted both in Massachusetts and New York. This comes from Massachusetts nonprofits' concerns about diverting the billions of dollars that would be invested in a stranded asset and instead trying to use that as a down payment in a truly carbon neutral system. Another study from Massachusetts last year looked at the costs of non-gas heating alternatives. So if we take the rate increase that utilities have rate-based to pay for the pipeline replacements, this comes out in Massachusetts to be that by about 2030, air source heat pumps, the green line here, roughly comes out as cheaper than the current gas system. If we actually take the payback period to be 2050 instead of 2110, then air source heat pumps become economically competitive with gas at about 2026. Ground source heat pumps, the orange line here, are already cheaper because ground source heat pumps achieve higher efficiencies than air source heat pumps, as Professor Mark just told us about, because unlike air, the ground stays at around 50 degrees in optimum temperature for heat pump efficiency. And then that efficiency can be further improved and the costs reduced by interconnecting ground source heat pumps in multiple buildings through a neighborhood underground shared loop, a network ground source heat pump system, aka a geogrid. Now, there are a number of interesting technologies that could be intriguing from the point of view of networked thermal heating and cooling systems. There's potential to store thermal energy in subway tunnels, as London is doing. There's potential to store thermal energy in sewage, as the Philadelphia Water Department has been doing for the last 10 years in its Southeast Water Pollution Control Plant. Aquifer thermal energy storage, or ATIS, is widely used in the Netherlands. And of course, network ground source heat pump systems, which align well with the pattern of gas pipe, utility rights of way, and worker skill sets that gas utilities currently have. So what might a partnership with the water department look like in terms of thermal storage in sewage, or partnerships with mass transit agencies in terms of thermal storage in subway tunnels? PGW could play a role in mapping out heat sources and heat sinks that could make for efficient heating and cooling. But whatever the technology, it's vital to transition off of methane and its climate impacts, because we now understand the incredible difficulty of actually plugging the leaks, even if pipelines are replaced. I'd just like to close with a short historical anecdote. Apologies in advance. It's hard to get the professor out of me, but a short historical anecdote that reminds us that upcoming decades will not be the first time that gas systems will have had to transform dramatically, as Chairman Green said in the introduction, and that when motivated to move quickly, utilities can actually do so at lightning speed. Now, I have only studied this in the context of New York City, but I would bet that Philadelphia faced a very similar situation, because in the 19th century, most cities that used natural gas for lighting and heating did so with gas produced right in the city in what were called manufactured gas plants from coal via coal gasification processes. Then in 1949, a brand new pipeline was approved to run 1,000 miles from Texas to New York City. And so the two big gas utilities in New York started thinking about how to switch to natural gas arriving via pipeline, which meant they would no longer have any need for the manufactured gas plants or the massive gas holders that occupied prime real estate in the city. But on top of that, at a chemical level, natural gas was different from manufactured gas. Not to get into the details, but manufactured gas is a mixture of carbon monoxide and hydrogen. Natural gas is almost pure methane, as we know. So the difference between the two was significant enough that appliances built for the one could not work with the other. What did they do? It led to what was known as the Great Changeover, in which the gas companies went door to door to convert all of the appliances in the city. The two utilities undertook a massive operation to convert every gas-burning appliance in their service territories, with technicians visiting every customer over the course of 2 years to retrofit their devices. Con Ed did so in 1951, Brooklyn Union in 1952. Con Edison had 1.4 million customers with an average of 2 appliances each. Brooklyn Union had 350,000 customers with a total of 2 million appliances total. And interestingly, Con Edison was able to employ many of the workers at the manufactured gas plants that they were closing. And that conversion team grew to over 1,000 employees during the final stage of the work, which was the conversion of Manhattan Island. So 2 to 3 million appliances, new infrastructure, all in 2 years while taking care of their workers. PGW is well positioned to transform once again and to put its workers to work in building, switching over, and helping maintain a truly carbon-free heating and cooling system. And I think they can do so. Thank you very much. I'm happy to answer questions. And this is my email for anyone who would like to follow up further.
Thank you, Professor Persner. Appreciate that history and information. Mr. Yim, you're next to testify.
Good morning. My name is Edward Yim, and I lead ACEEE's Utility and State Policy team. ACEEE stands for the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, which is a nonprofit founded in 1980, and we provide research, education, and advocacy on energy efficiency matters to local, state, and federal governments, as well as to utilities and utility regulators. As a former Philly resident and a former staff of the Pennsylvania legislature, I thank Chair Green and the joint committees for making the space to weigh in on these important issues regarding Philadelphia's energy future. At ACEEE, we support beneficial electrification, which means electrifying energy uses that result in lower energy use, lower consumer costs, and lower greenhouse gas emissions. Heating electrification is often a good example of beneficial electrification. Heating space and water, as you all know, represents a significant component of greenhouse gas emissions for Philadelphia, and the city will not be able to meet its climate goal without decarbonizing heat. So as the PGW study shows, there are 2 options for decarbonizing heat. One is to use decarbonized fuels, and the other is to electrify heating using heat pump technology such as ground source or air source heat pumps that others have already mentioned. For Philadelphia, we think the better option is electrifying heating. The advantages of heating electrification are clear. You use less energy, you use less money on energy, your greenhouse gas footprint goes down, and is good for your health. Some worry that heating electrification will increase the stress on the grid, especially during cold hours in the winter. But the electrical grid is designed and can be designed to leave enough room to accommodate new demand. And brief periods of intense energy use during those cold hours can be addressed through demand management strategies, including the use of energy storage. And it should be emphasized that heat pumps can work and do work while in cold weather, even for air source heat pumps. Currently, cold climate air source heat pumps perform well in cold weather down to about 5 degrees Fahrenheit. A 20-year weather data set for Philadelphia shows that the city experienced temperature below 5 degrees Fahrenheit for an average of 6 hours per year. For those minimal 6 hours, when the temperature may dip below 5 degrees, the heat pumps will use their backup resistance heating coils, which is less efficient way of heating that some households still use in Philadelphia. Because the temperature rarely dips below 5 degrees in Philadelphia, as I just mentioned, the resulting impact on the grid from the inefficient heating can be minimal and manageable. Others worry that if the grid suffers an outage, Philadelphians will be left without heating. But in the event of an outage, the same problem will exist for natural gas furnaces, which have essential components like the blower motor that require electricity. The solution to that concern is a resilient grid. So when you compare the cost of heating electrification with the other option of using decarbonized fuels, the difference becomes also clear. Compared to today's natural gas price of roughly $7 per MMBTU at the Henry Hub, the PGW study projects these fuels could cost as much as $60 to $80 per MMBTU, assuming the study's costs are for wholesale, a price that's roughly 10 times higher. And as the study points out, the carbon neutral biogas is limited in quantity. The amount of hydrogen that can be blended with methane is also limited. And it will take some time for synthetic methane to reach commercialization. And there remains a view that these decarbonized fuels may not be truly carbon neutral from a life cycle accounting of greenhouse gas perspective, and that may create some uncertainty whether this option can deliver on the goal of carbon neutrality for Philadelphia. And lastly, decarbonized fuels, either when they leak or when they combust, will continue to produce harmful emissions that could cause health problems. So heating electrification is already taking place, and market trends already favor electric heat for new small residential and commercial buildings due to lower cost to builders. So heating electrification is a new reality, and PGW should face that reality and proactively manage the associated risks in advance. One way to do that is to get back to the essence of its business, which is providing heat, not selling commodity. In that regard, we think that a pilot for the option identified as network geothermal systems is compelling. Unlike air source heat pumps, ground source heat pump based network system, there is a pipe infrastructure that can be owned by PGW, representing a less disruptive transition from the current business model, including PGW keeping their customer base. The skill sets of PGW workers, as others have mentioned, should be transferable, thereby minimizing the workforce transition issues. And providing heat through pipes may also be particularly advantageous for many older buildings that use radiators, thereby lowering retrofit costs. We recommend that the pilot focus on neighborhoods with buildings that use hot water heat distribution systems in particular. This pilot may not be inexpensive when viewed as a standalone project, but when compared to the business as usual investment, including the cost of gas pipe replacement, the business case for the pilot should be much improved. The Council could ensure that PGW consider a full and balanced list of costs and benefits when evaluating the pilot, including the avoided cost of gas pipe replacement, as well as the avoided costs associated with pollution. To sum up, heating electrification is the better option for Philadelphia, and the network geothermal system pilot could point to a transition pathway that is less disruptive. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yim. Are there any questions from members of council for this panel? All right, thank you all for your testimony and information. It was quite informative and provides quite a bit of context to this conversation that we're having regarding PGW diversification, both ideas for the future and also a historical perspective. So definitely appreciate your input this morning. At this point, I'd like to call our next witness, Mr. Burgos.
Chairman Green, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thank you so much.
Great.
And before you state your name for the record, I just want to say I appreciate you being on this morning. I know you were here from Boise, Idaho, and you had a chance to talk with my staff. Your mayor, Laura McLean, and I are part of a group called the New Deal, which we will have here in Philadelphia May 23rd and 24th. And it was during our conversation during the National League of Cities conference, I learned about the work that you're doing, and I thought it was very interesting and informative, especially considering PGW is going through a diversification study. So thank you for being here this morning.
Chairman Green, my pleasure. Thank you to you and the members of the Joint Committee. My name is Steve Burgos. I'm the Public Works Director with the City of Boise, and I oversee the operation of 4 utilities in Boise, including the geothermal heating utility. Boise owns and operates the largest geothermal heating district in the country. We heat public and private building space in the downtown core of Boise and on the Boise State University campus. In addition to space heating, the geothermal system provides heating to downtown pools, provides hot water to laundry services in several large hotels, and is even used for sidewalks, snow melt in some instances. As Chairman Green mentioned, Mayor McLean has been committed to climate action. She recently committed the city of Boise to be carbon neutral by 2050, and our geothermal system is going to play an innovative part in reaching that goal. As the largest system in the country, we believe Boise is ground zero for geothermal use as a renewable alternative to thermal energy for carbon-based fuels. This energy source is local, so it's not subject to the impact of price fluctuations resulting from national or international crises, as we've seen over the last several months. It's also sustainable, both as a near-term or a near carbon-free heating source, as well as one that returns the water back to the very aquifer from which it was withdrawn. On an annual basis, the city's geothermal system pumps up about 300 million gallons of 177-degree water from 3 production wells located along the Boise front. That water is then collected, piped, and injected 3,700 feet back down into the aquifer after use. The water is used in our downtown core, as I mentioned, to heat 90-plus buildings, equating to over 6 million square feet of downtown building space. The city's system was first installed in the 80s as a demonstration project, funded in part by a grant from the U.S. Department of Energy. The initial funding source was about $7 million, of which DOE covered 70%. The system has been successfully in operation for 40 years now, and though it started as a demonstration and research and development project, it has definitely moved well past that, and it has established itself as a viable heating energy source for downtown Boise. It is now run as a formal utility within the city of Boise, and has an approximately 99.5% uptime. Specific to geothermal and the benefits it provides to the community, on an annual basis, carbon offsets associated with the operation of the system equal approximately 6,600 metric tons of CO2 equivalent reduction, which equates to the planting of approximately 304,000 trees or removing 19.5 million vehicle miles from the road on an annual basis. In addition, the system is relatively straightforward to operate. It's got a few moving parts and basic building HVAC equipment to extract heat from the water. As a result, the system is a great source of community pride and has strong support for continued system expansion and innovation. The system doesn't come without challenges. During the 40 years of service, we've had specific challenges. For example, the geothermal system, as been discussed in previous testimony, competes with natural gas pricing. Initially, the utility price point was closely indexed to natural gas on a per BTU basis. This worked relatively well financially for the better part of 3 decades until natural gas prices dipped significantly in the late 2000s. At this time, we made a decision to decouple our geothermal rates from natural gas pricing and charged based on more accurately the cost of providing the service. It should be noted that even with historically low natural gas prices, buildings on the geothermal system can compete with and at times be lower than natural gas based on the efficiency of the heat exchangers within the building. So I mentioned the water coming out of the aquifer is at about 177 degrees. The break point for being as efficient to beat natural gas prices is about 73 degrees of heat taking it off the water. If you can be above 73 degrees of heat, if your system is that efficient, you can actually be lower than natural gas prices. So in addition to competition with the natural gas prices, Boise's system is also challenged by the difficult operational conditions inherent to a system moving hot water underground. While pipe material technologies have advanced, and they certainly have over the last several decades, the original system was comprised of pipe that did not respond well to expansion and contraction and corrosive soils that, over time, resulted in the need for an active asset management program to maintain consistent replacement of aging pipe. Moving forward, the city is excited about the potential opportunities to leverage and expand the existing system. We certainly are seeing demand from customers in the downtown core increase. That is certainly growing. Certainly as customers start to look out into the potential for carbon pricing being included in carbon-based fuels. There's also expanding research and development into emerging technologies like thermoelectric materials that can be used to turn the heat directly into electricity. And I'll share that city staff recently completed a design sprint process that focused on how to leverage innovation to expand the amount and types of system uses, with the final report expected in the coming months. we're excited to see what comes out of that. And with that, I will stand for any questions from the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Burgos. Just have a question. What opportunities do you see through the Investment Infrastructure Jobs Act as a way to upgrade your system, considering that you've had the system since the 80s, and that's also an area that I'm looking at as an opportunity as we're looking at network geothermal and other opportunities for PGW to diversify?
Chairman Green, thank you for the question. We think there are several opportunities that are developing within DOE specific to geothermal. We're fortunate that the Idaho National Lab that's located in the eastern part of the state is one of the lead labs on geothermal, and we've been working with them to get access to potential funding through DOE, both through the Infrastructure Act, but also through potential use of ARPA money that we've had access to at the city. Fundamentally, the geothermal system, while it is a heat utility, it is a water utility as well, and there are some ability to potentially use the ARPA funding for water infrastructure. So we're looking at that as well.
And do you see other departments other than Department of Energy as opportunities for funding through the IIJA? One of the challenges that I've seen is that it's such a large piece of legislation, 1.7 trillion, and there are a lot of different departments that have funding opportunities that may not be the ones you would traditionally think about, but could provide some funding opportunities for a project in various cities. So beyond Department of Energy, are there other departments that you're looking at for possible funding opportunities?
Chairman Green, thanks for the question. Part of the challenge has been kind of where is the funding going to be routed? What we're hearing more and more is that the funding is going to be routed to the states. So it'll be the state government that will start to dole out the funding either through, for example, in Idaho, we're hearing more that the water funding will likely go through state revolving fund through the state. We're trying to make a case that the geothermal system could be eligible for some of those drinking water, wastewater, and other types of water system funding. And so not necessarily a department per se, but I think the more we talk with our folks that are in DC and talking with the mayor's office, it's becoming apparent that most of the funding is coming through the state. And so we're very actively working with the state of Idaho and the different departments in the State Department of Environmental Quality, for example, to make sure that we understand how that money gets doled out and can it be, some of it be used for expansion, repair of our geothermal system downtown.
And one last question. Are you working with any consultants or other entities, professional services companies that are helping you to navigate some of the funding opportunities in DC? I know I've been hearing other cities have been doing that, and I was curious if that is something that you're doing, especially for investment opportunities for your system.
Thank you for the question, Chairman Green. Yes, we have. We've retained Jacobs Consulting to help us navigate some of the ARPA funding pieces in particular, and we do have federal lobbyists that are in DC helping us navigate some of the wickets on the infrastructure funding. So we have retained consultants to help us do that.
Thank you. That's one of the things I've been advocating to the administration. I know that Mike Carroll from Otis has been looking at that, but when I look at all of the various city departments from water, airport, PGW, to try to have a more comprehensive approach to this opportunity, because there are a lot of different funding sources, and it's difficult to navigate all of the various opportunities without having a more comprehensive strategy to address that. So thank you for being here this morning, providing your testimony, provide some great information, and it kind of provides some additional context as we're continuing to look at how we diversify PGW. Are there any questions from members of council for this witness? Okay, seeing none, thank you so much, and we look forward to continuing the conversation with you, and thank you. And please give my regards to your mayor.
I'll do that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Mr. Inuz, if you could read the next list of speakers for the next panel.
Anton Michaels, Jack Deanna, Leanna Bond, and Jonathan Schrag.
If you could just state your name for the record, and also excuse me for 1 second, I'm going to come off screen and off mic so we can go in that order.
Hello. Good morning. My name is Anton Michaels. Can you hear me?
Yes, please proceed with your testimony.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in front of this committee. As I said, my name is Anton Michels. I moved 2007 to the city of Philadelphia and became 2008 the chief operating officer of the German Society of Pennsylvania, the oldest German-American organization in this country. We are in business since 1764, so we are even 12 years older than the United States. And I had the honor to serve as the German Society's president between 2015 and 2016. In this capacity, I was involved to answer the question what a customer of PGW, which we are since their founding in 1836, because we had multiple properties in the city of Philadelphia before we moved in 1879 to the what now West Poplar neighborhood, back then Northern Liberties neighborhood of the city of Philadelphia. So we completed our new building in 1888 and moved into that area and are there ever since. And we faced firsthand all the changes that had happened to this neighborhood in the past 130 years, the ups and downs, and the ups in recent days too. We are in the middle of a neighborhood that is very diverse. We are next door neighbors to the Spring Garden Street subsidized Philadelphia Housing Authority projects. So we are familiar with the problems that occur in low income areas, at least to a certain part, because most of our members are not living close by; they're living in Philadelphia and all over Pennsylvania. We had the challenge in the early 2010s to face the question how to replace our heating and cooling systems that in our building. Of course, that building was not air conditioned when it was built in 1888, but it had multiple systems that had been installed over 130 years. You can imagine there was everything from a coal-fired stove to window units, you name it. So we made the decision that we want to replace all of that and tackle the project to air condition the entire heat and the entire building. We looked at different options. We hired as a non-for-profit organization. We hired a consultant, and the consultant came up with different solutions, of which the geothermal solution was, of course, the most expensive, estimated in our case to $2.6 million. We did not like what the consultants came up with, but because we thought that their approach was too much offering off-the-shelf solutions. And since we were not afraid to discuss what kind of investment we could manage, we canceled the contract with the consultants and decided that we do it on our own because we would like to. We wanted to use the entire potential of solutions. So we decided to not to apply for grants because the grants would tie us to the use of certain companies in Philadelphia. So we decided to finance that on our own. And I'm proud to say that at the end of the day, when we completed that system in 2021, we achieved to do the geothermal wellfield round loop solution for a little more than 50% of what the consultants had estimated. We spent about $1.35 million in establishing a ground loop well field under our parking lot, supplying the entire building of about 20,000 square feet, including the opportunity to offer additional capacities to our neighbors, which we did. So we discussed early on if we would like to be part of a geothermal network in the neighborhood. And so we completed that system, and we are extremely happy. We considered other things like the water, air sourced heat pumps, but we thought that these were not as efficient as we would like to have it. So we went for a company in outside of Philadelphia, establishing our well field as a closed loop heat pump system, and we are very happy with it. And by doing so, it was of course difficult for an existing building that was not planned to be supplied with a geothermal system. To implement that, we were able to do that over the time of 5 years without the interruption of our operation. We established business relationships with different local and not local companies who did the implementation. We acted at that time as the German society itself as a general contractor, because we wanted to cut out the middleman and coordinated the necessary work, plumbing and electric and all of that by ourselves. So that made it also possible to achieve the goal of not exceeding the budget. Besides, in my case, I was afraid to have the usual return on investment discussion with my board at that time. And since we were able to establish proposals that would, let's say, show that we can do it for almost 50%, we didn't have a single second of a return on investment discussion, because what we paid for the geothermal well field system was exactly the same amount that a traditional system would have cost. So we are very happy with that. So at the end, we were asked to become co-founders of Geodelphia, an organization started by the Sierra Club and other organizations here in Philadelphia to promote the use of geothermal energy. And our pitch towards this committee and the city of Philadelphia and PGW would be to start a pilot project in our neighborhood in which we would like to participate. We are suggesting that that a pilot project should be at the core of the Edgar Allan Poe House on 7th Street. The Edgar Allan Poe House is in the, of course, possession of the National Park Service, and the National Park Service has anyways at this time a contract with PGW to replace the heating systems in that for that building. We believe that it would be possible to drill on the grounds of the National Park Service, the Poe House, enough wells to supply not just the Poe House with heating and cooling capacity, but also the neighbor, the PHA community center next door, as well as the Guildhouse subsidized retirement facility next door. So we would like to help out and bring in our experience in that regards to establish a network geothermal project in the city of Philadelphia. And I'm glad that City Council is considering to change the guidelines for PGW to approach a project like that and maintain and develop sustainable jobs for the PGW's staff in the future. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify.
Thank you for your testimony. Our next witness is Jack Deanna, to be followed by Ms. Bond and Jonathan Schrag.
Thank you, Chairman Green. My name is Jack Deanna. I'm the Executive Director of the Geothermal National and International Initiative. I'm also an ambassador of the International Ground Source Heat Pump Association and also a founding member of New York Geo, PA Geo, California Geo, and many other geothermal associations. I've been in this business in geothermal for approximately 35 years, and I touch about 40% of all the commercial and institutional projects in the United States. I also happen to live in Delaware County, Springfield. I'm going to approach this a little bit differently because I'm also a utility employer, was a utility employee, retired. This technology, which is actually, as most people have stated, it uses the thermal energy from the earth to provide heating and cooling to facilities. And what I want to talk about is the whole idea of networking geothermal. Right now, I'm suggesting that the networking system that PGW looks at in this whole study that you're doing would be
Mr. Deanna. Hold on one second. Anyone that's not speaking, please mute your microphone so we just hear Mr. Deanna and no background noise. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. The system I'm promoting is one that uses the K-12 schools as the anchor tenant for a geothermal system. I'm not sure. I'll give you some facts on this technology, but K-12 schools are second largest public infrastructure investment in the U.S. and actually in Philadelphia also, and are one of the biggest energy consumers in the public sector. K-12 schools also consume about 8% of all the energy used in commercial buildings and emits as much carbon dioxide as 18 coal-powered plants. The average age of a K-12 school in Philadelphia is 49 years old. So 49 years old is probably being kind. If we talk about the future of Philadelphia and who that future is, by the time a student graduates high school, they've spent about 15,600 hours inside a school. That's only second to the time spent at home. A heating-only school, which is 99% of the schools in Philadelphia, has a relative humidity of 10 to 20%. There are two studies right now by Harvard and Yale that states higher relative humidity impedes the transmission of respiratory viruses. If that sounds familiar, that's COVID. By installing geothermal technology in schools, we raise that relative humidity to 40 to 60%. Now, why I'm saying this is the fact that a network system or planning a network system in a neighborhood involves quite a bit of disruption. But if we were to use the school as the anchor tenant for that network, in other words, we would install a system in a school, install a system in the soccer field, in the parking lot, wherever it would be. That school would always be the anchor tenant for that technology. It would support the fact and show PGW and the city of Philadelphia the value of this technology. It would also allow for the training and of the professionals that are working for workforce of PGW. As I stated before, I'm a ambassador for this industry. This technology uses high-density polyethylene pipe to take the thermal energy from the ground into the school. So we operate on BTUs. What PGW, the value for this for PGW is they can also sell that same BTUs as opposed to selling CCFs. The difference between this is the fact that as a gas company right now, they're one-dimensional. In other words, they only sell heating. By adopting geothermal heat pump technology, they actually become a space conditioning, meaning heating and cooling. So I'm saying that the pilot programs that you should look at should be centered around schools. Probably very few people are aware that the city of Philadelphia had some of the very first geothermal applications in buildings. The Ronald McDonald House was the very first Ronald McDonald House in the nation that has geothermal technology in it, geothermal heat pump technology in it. The West Philadelphia Enterprise Center, which is 46th and Market, the old Bandstand KYW building, has geothermal. It's now the West Philadelphia Enterprise Center that has geothermal system in it. The New Kensington Art School is totally geothermal. So I'm looking at this not as just a pilot program to see whether it works. This technology is 45 years old. I happen to sit on the DOE's geothermal visionary team. So we are not talking about feasibility of geothermal heat pumps. We're talking about what it would do not only for PGW, but for the city of Philadelphia. And I believe that using schools as the pilot projects would, one, be easier as far as installing the infrastructure. Two, it would give us a way to have the current workforce of PGW be acclimated to what they would be doing with geothermal technology. And it would also support moving forward a viable business alternative for a PGW. But primarily, it would also give the students that attend our schools a better learning environment, a healthy and safer and healthier environment, and show them that renewable energy can be used to everyone's benefit, reducing emissions, lowering energy costs, and providing very good jobs for the city of Philadelphia. I should mention that I'm also board chairman for Community Action Agency of Delaware County. We run 5 shelters. We actually have bought an elementary school that we have geothermal installed in, where we probably deal with about, we take people from total dependency to total self-sufficiency. So, like I said, I've been doing this for a long time, and I think I put together teams that make sure that this gets done right. So I'm at your service. If you choose, I would be glad to help you in this venture. And once again, I'm looking at this as a new business opportunity for PGW, because if they're going to move to the future, they've got to have a way to do it. And I believe geothermal heat pumps are one way to do it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for your testimony. And as you were talking, it made me think about the work we've done with the Philadelphia Energy Authority and really providing opportunity to bring solar panels to schools in the city of Philadelphia, and also provide the opportunity to expose young people to that green collar industry. And there's been a number of young people who are now moving into that industry. So thank you for your ideas and suggestions. It helps to add to this conversation of the possibilities for the future. We'll now have Ms. Bond and Mr. Schrag.
Hi, good morning. My name is Linnea Bond, and I'm speaking on behalf of Physicians for Social Responsibility's Pennsylvania chapter, representing doctors and nurses, public health professionals, and consumer protection advocates dedicated to promoting public health. I want to acknowledge the challenges in staying engaged in an online hearing for this long, and I am grateful for the opportunity to speak to the council this morning. The medical field recognizes the immediacy of the human health crisis of climate change. In early April, the IPCC released research that in order to eliminate global emissions by 2050, the emissions must peak by 2025 and halve by 2030. As the City of Philadelphia is committed to the 2050 deadline, I ask members of City Council today to ensure PGW's transition is aligned with this path. Speaking on behalf of medical professionals, I must acknowledge first that natural gas is a harmful substance from extraction through the supply line to use. Living close to gas extraction sites increases the risk of premature birth and congenital heart defects. Indoor air is often 2 to 5 times more polluted than outdoor air due to factors like unvented natural gas, and Americans spend 90% of their time indoors on average. A meta-analysis of 41 studies found that children living in homes with gas stoves have a 42% increased risk of experiencing asthma symptoms and a 24% increased risk of ever being diagnosed with asthma by a doctor in their lifetime. The Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America ranks Philadelphia the 7th most challenging city to live with asthma. Gas leaks throughout the supply chain, as Nicholas Pevsner so clearly laid out, putting neighborhoods at risk for deadly explosions. I echo the concerns of Bishop Royster, Steve Luxton, and others that these issues affect us all, but fall disproportionately on our lowest income residents. Even setting aside all of the harms I've stated, the fact remains that the extraction, transportation, and use of natural gas is one of the major contributors to climate change. Methane from natural gas is the second largest source of carbon pollution after oil. From a public health perspective, building electrification, as Ashita Gona and others spoke of in their testimony, is our only option. Geothermal energy is the only safe choice PGW has ahead. PGW's proposal of investing in greenwashed renewable gas, so-called decarbonized gas, is not our solution because according to the PGW diversification study, decarbonized gas still emits carbon. We have no option but to stop using fossil fuels and build sustainable infrastructure immediately. Any more time and money spent on building or facilitating the sustained use of natural gas in any carbon-emitting form is working against our healthy, sustainable future. City Council members should include in the ordinance establishing PGW's fiscal year 23 capital budget a requirement that PGW perform the thermal network advanced engineering work proposed by Power in fiscal year 23. Physicians for Social Responsibility Pennsylvania calls on the City Council to make this requirement part of approving PGW's capital budget because it relates to preparation for potential future capital investments by PGW in thermal networks on behalf of the health of Philadelphians. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Ms. Bond. Mr. Schrag?
Thank you. Good morning. Can you hear me all right? Can you hear me, Chairman Green?
Yes. Proceed with your testimony.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Green and council members. My name is Jonathan Schrag. I'm engaged as a consulting gas expert on behalf of the Clean Air Council, and I'm grateful for this opportunity to speak with you. I've got an extensive background in gas regulation. Most recently, from 2016 to 2020, I was the Deputy Administrator of the Rhode Island Division of Public Utilities, responsible for regulating natural gas utilities across the state. And I currently work as a consulting expert to the Massachusetts office of the Attorney General Moore Healey on gas matters. Previously, I served as the first executive director of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. And my work focuses on how regulation can incentivize or require utilities to decarbonize. I'm speaking to you today from the south end of Boston, a neighborhood that first received gas in 1832 and is trying to decarbonize. What I'd like to talk with you about today are changes taking place in the U.S. natural gas business and the things PGW should do to protect Philadelphia's gas ratepayers, especially its most at-risk customers. Some of it you've heard from other speakers. I've heard everything that I have heard I have agreed with, and I have heard nothing today that I disagree with. I've got some new information for you that I think will be helpful, especially as a former gas regulator. I want to suggest a series of concrete steps that you can take. So what are the changes affecting the gas industry? First, the price of the gas commodity. In the last year, gas has more than doubled. Philadelphia is particularly exposed to volatile and rising prices as it sits at the end of regional pipelines and must rely on expensive liquefied natural gas storage. Second, over the last 5 years, U.S. gas supply has become integrated with global markets through LNG export terminals. And here, a shout out to Councilmember Jones for his insightful question. Before 2017, gas produced in North America stayed here. But the gas industry lobbied hard in 2016 and 17 to expand authorization for gas LNG exports. Those export terminals now allow North American gas to move around the world to whichever places are willing to pay the most. So U.S. gas customers must now compete with customers all over the world and pay higher prices that result from international events, whatever they may be, a nuclear accident in Japan or a war in Ukraine. Third, the cost of the gas pipeline capacity is increasing. This is one of the most complex areas of the gas business, the procurement of gas pipeline capacity from interstate wholesale shippers. Gas regional pipelines are full, capacity is expensive, and as a result, PGW must rely on LNG storage to meet peak winter demand. Reducing gas consumption can pay dividends when cumulative consumption drops to what the pipeline can carry, allowing PGW to release the cost that it pays for storage. Finally, as you've heard, new electric end-use technologies, air source or ground source heat pumps, will require gas companies to compete for customers in a way that they haven't had to in the past. These are all new risks and new pressures affecting PGW. And so the best path for PGW to manage these risks is to diversify its business. It'll offer an opportunity for PGW to shed some of its current costs as demand for gas declines. In the diversification study, those costs are estimated to not exist. But in fact, looking through PGW's filings, one can see that there may be as much as $40 million annually in savings from reduced storage. In the February 9th public hearing, PGW management articulated its opposition to business diversification and its commitment to a business-as-usual strategy. This is contrary to city policy, overlooks long-term risks to the PGW enterprise, and is inconsistent with the best practice of gas utilities in other parts of the Northeast. Now, it's always going to be easier to effect change if utility management is a willing partner. But sometimes we all need a nudge to realize that we need to be good partners. Given the current PGW management's opposition to business diversification, this committee should give PGW a nudge, requiring them to execute specific and concrete actions. So what are some of those actions? First, PGW should develop a weatherization finance and service business. Building on the diversification study recommendation, require that PGW submit a business plan within 6 months and assign an appropriate business leader within PGW to serve as an executive of this new business. PGW should immediately undertake this pilot project for network geodistricts. You should build on the study recommendations again and require the Office of Sustainability to commission a feasibility study. PGW needs to develop a site selection process. PGW should complete a cost estimate and find an existing neighborhood to site the project. The Office of Sustainability should find a way to construct housing, new housing, utilizing a geodistrict. And PGW, again, needs to find an appropriate business leader to act as an executive who will lead this important division for the next decade. PGW needs to develop organizational capacity around a tactical thermal transition to understand the key reliability and revenue interactions between gas and electric systems on a block-by-block level. That means creating a digital gas system map as the basis for system planning. That map can be shared by regulators, the utility, and stakeholders. It should identify load centers, maximum hourly load, and zones in which upgrades may be needed in the near future. They should submit a plan to interact with PECO to plan strategic electrification. And on this planning function, this information technology heavy function, they need to assign an appropriate business leader to act as an executive to lead. PGW needs to submit an investment alternatives cost calculator to evaluate the benefits and costs of particular investments in a transparent and explicit way. Utilities have to analyze investments all the time. That's what business leaders do. But PGW needs to make the calculations they do and the equations they run, the comparisons they make, explicit. And they need to reflect the risks and the factors that matter to the City Council. Finally, the Office of Sustainability needs to be empowered with sufficient expertise to engage in gas regulatory discussions with PGW. Utilities respond to the regulatory process, not general policy statements. If PGW management will not seriously undertake a program of business diversification in response to the City Council's leadership, then you can make approval of the PGW operating and capital budgets conditional on implementation of a list including these recommendations. And finally, just as utility businesses, enterprises, respond to financial incentives, so too do its executives. This is a sensitive area, and I want to speak carefully, but it is an appropriate exercise of the Council's oversight authority for it to investigate how the professional expertise and executive compensation of current PGW leadership align with the future mission of PGW. For example, all of the 7 executives listed as leadership appear to have long gas industry backgrounds. Which ones will have responsibility for development of analytic tools to plan gas demand in coordination with PECO? Which executive will be responsible for developing new businesses? Should compensation levels be adjusted to reflect current skills and relevance to the decarbonization mission? Is it appropriate for the Council to send a signal of dissatisfaction through executive compensation? For example, Mr. Shapiro receives $450,000 annually in compensation and is eligible for an additional 10% bonus at the discretion of the Philadelphia Facilities Management Corporation. On what basis does he earn that additional $45,000, and could the Council tie execution of the recommendations here to bonus compensation? Other jurisdictions across the United States are recognizing the changing dynamics within the gas industry. In Massachusetts, in California, and in New York, there are new planning processes and new compensation processes taking hold. Together, these 3 jurisdictions are beginning to reform the operations of gas utilities. The citizens who are most at risk and least able to pay the higher bills will be the ones who suffer as a result of PGW's failure to address the risks and business opportunities outlined here. As customers with the means to reduce gas consumption, to upgrade their installations or install heat pumps, switch away from gas, low-income customers will pay the remaining fixed costs of the gas system. Taking steps toward business diversification today is a step toward protecting citizens for decades to come. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions from members of council for this panel? I do not see any comments or questions from members of council. I believe that's the last panel. We do have some here who are signed up for public comment. Mr. Iannuzzi, if you could read those names.
Pamela Darville, Sean Hogan, John Braxton, Wynn Constantani, Rachel Mulberry, and William Cousins.
Okay, are those parties here to testify?
Yes, I'm Pamela Darville. I'm here.
Okay. That was Miss Darville. What about Sean Hogan?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. I saw John Braxton. Wynn Constantini?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. Rachel Mulberry?
She will be able to make it back by 12:15.
Okay. Well, the hearing may be concluded by then. Also, is William Cousins here?
Yes, I'm here. I'm having
Okay, and we
trouble
will
turning my camera on, but I'm working on
Okay,
that.
we will testify in that order. Because this hearing has lasted longer than anticipated, I also have another matter I have to attend to, so I will be off camera. But we will start with make sure I get the correct pronunciation. Hold on. Miss Darville.
Thank you.
And also one other quick moment, because we have had a long hearing, and we know the stenographer also has been here for some time. We're going to ask that everyone can complete their presentation in less than 3 minutes.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Chairman Green. Good morning, council members. My name is Pamela Darville. I am a resident of Germantown, Philadelphia, and I'm here to request that City Council instruct PGW to invest in thermal network advanced engineering work in its fiscal year 2023 capital budget. And I'm making that request for two reasons. Based on the testimony that's been presented today, it's clear that geothermal energy is cleaner and is cheaper than the use of fossil fuels. As I said, I'm a resident of Germantown. I live in one of those big houses in Germantown, old house, which costs a lot to heat. During the winter months, my heating bill averages from $2,000 to $3,000. Even though I'm on a budget plan, my monthly bill is close to $300 to $400. As Bishop Royster testified, this bill is a challenge at times to pay. And with the use of geothermal energy, based on what we've been told today in testimony, that type of energy is cheaper. It's cleaner based on the testimony today. I'm sure people are familiar with the UN report on climate change, that there is an urgency to address the issues that climate change presents. And with the use of geothermal energy replacing fossil fuel, we can accomplish that. Thank you for allowing me to present my testimony today, and thank you.
Thank you. Next witness, please proceed.
Hi, my name is Sean Hogan. I'm actually going to read Rachel Mulberry's testimony because she won't be able to make it back in time. So wherever I say I'm speaking from Rachel's perspective. So my name is Rachel. I'm a PGW ratepayer and a member of Philly DSA. I'm here today because I need PGW and PGW needs me. I'm here because our futures are woven together, and the diversification study and upcoming annual budget should tell that story, but don't. I'm also here to tell you about how my father called me a couple weeks ago with pride in his voice to tell me that he and my mom have fully transitioned their house off of gas. The old furnace was gone, and an electrician had come in to wire the kitchen for an induction stove. My parents could afford to electrify their home thanks to their pensions from decades working in high-paying public sector jobs, not unlike the jobs that give PGW workers, families, and communities financial security. Those are the kinds of jobs that make me proud to live in a place with a public gas utility and not a privatized one. My dad said that I should start saving to do the same, that getting off of gas is the right thing to do for the climate and for loved ones like my sister, who spent so many hours as a kid breathing through a nebulizer because of asthma. PGW can't afford to lose more people like my parents, and none of them can afford to lose good jobs like the ones that my parents had and that PGW creates. And the future looks bleak for all of us in the absence of a real plan is to just saddle poor Philadelphians with even heavier loads of utility debt. The study pretends that we don't need each other. It says that tomorrow won't look that much different than yesterday, despite all of the evidence. Right around the time my dad called me, the UN Secretary General said that we have 30 months to start reducing global greenhouse emissions to have any chance at all of preventing the worst impacts of the climate crisis. 30 months. We need to pay for a pilot of network geothermal now, not in 1 year or two after more consultants write more reports. We need PGW to cut line items like replacing the LNG coal box for $14.5 million and instead add funding for installing heat pumps and electric stove, retaining customers like my parents who would otherwise leave on their own, and others like my neighbors who are falling behind over even higher bills. PGW needs us, and we need PGW. We can honor our interdependence by looking the future straight on and committing to get off fossil fuels with the speed and commitment that honors the value of our own lives and those of our loved ones. PGW is owned by us, the people of Philadelphia. We are here, and we are watching how you decide to act. Thank you.
The next speaker should go ahead.
I believe that is me, unless I'm jumping ahead of anybody. My name is John Braxton. I am assistant professor of biology at Community College of Philadelphia. I hold a graduate degree in ecology, and I've been a leader in both the Teamsters Union and the American Federation of Teachers, with 40 plus years of experience in each of these areas. I'm also a member of Philadelphia DSA, and with this background, I bring the twin perspectives of the importance of, one, moving away from fossil fuels as rapidly as possible, and two, preserving union jobs that are essential to the economic stability of our city. These two goals must not be separated from each other. Regarding the first goal, if we as a society don't cut our fossil fuel use approximately in half by 2030, we risk catastrophic storms, floods, droughts, and wildfires. It may seem contradictory to speak in the same sentence about floods and droughts, but we need only remember the drought-enhanced massive wildfires in California last summer, where my sister's entire town burned down. And at the same time, we remember the storm that filled the Vine Street Expressway with 20 feet of water. Catastrophes such as these will continue to happen with more frequency if we don't drastically and rapidly reduce our use of fossil fuels, and they will continue to happen right here in Philadelphia. Regarding the second goal, we can't force the working people in our city to bear the brunt of the difficult transition away from fossil fuels. It would be unjust to punish the workers who have supplied our city with heat for so many decades, and it will be politically impossible to move away from fossil fuels unless we have the support of the working class majority in our city. The problem is that the proposed PGW budget does not come close to meeting either of those goals. Since PGW is responsible for a significant portion of the greenhouse gas emissions in Philadelphia, it is essential that City Council ensures that PGW starts making real plans now. First, to electrify all buildings in the city by use of geothermal and air source heat pumps. Most immediately, PGW must commit to including a network geothermal pilot in the capital budget, as suggested by Power and others. Second, start training the current PGW workforce now in these new technologies so that good union jobs are preserved. You know, it's ironic, but continuing to invest in fossil fuels today, when renewables are becoming so much cheaper all the time, is comparable to investing in canals in the 1840s when the railroads were coming online. It just doesn't make any sense at all.
John, I'm sorry to cut in, but your 3 minutes is just up, so if you could just wrap up, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have one more paragraph and we'll wrap up very promptly. Thank you very much. This is not an abstract problem. Climate change is here. It's now. We have to do our part to limit the damage and to support the workers that have for so long supported us. Justice delayed is justice denied. We, the citizens of Philadelphia, are watching. We will hold our political leaders accountable. We, the citizens, can be remembered for allowing PGW to drag its feet, the modern equivalent of almost literally fiddling while Rome burned. Alternatively, City Council can take the lead, become a model for other cities across the country in providing a transition away from fossil fuels and a just transition for our workers. In so doing, City Council members will be remembered for rising to the occasion and dealing with this climate crisis. Please do the right thing. Thank you very much for your time.
Win?
Hi, my name is Wynn Costantini, and I am testifying today as a member of Philly DSA. Earlier this week, the Gas Commission rejected Power Interfaith's proposal to include $500,000 in the capital budget for a network geothermal pilot. PGW's newly approved capital budget reflects their commitment to fossil fuel producers, lobbyists, and the personal interests of their management. What's more, PGW is now also attempting to block public participation in their operating budget process, a transparent move that shows that PGW is not committed to meeting the needs of current and future Philadelphians. If the City Council is genuinely committed to addressing the climate emergency, it cannot entertain any claims that funding new gas infrastructure and long-term maintenance of our current gas infrastructure is somehow in the interest of Philadelphians or the environment. We must view every dollar spent on gas infrastructure, including renewable natural gas, as one that could instead be spent on ensuring long-term job stability for PGW workers and new union jobs for Philadelphians, preventing asthma and other respiratory health issues through improved air quality, programs to address the urgent issues of utility burden and housing disrepair, investing in renewable energy projects, and developing network geothermal and other electrification pilots so we can have an equitably decarbonized city. The City Council must take this opportunity in front of them to require that PGW operate in the interests of all Philadelphians. City Council must prevent PGW from restricting public participation in future budget processes and must also require that PGW invest in technologies like network geothermal, which have the greatest potential to decarbonize our city while preserving and expanding these good union jobs. Thank you.
Hello, this is Bill Cousins, and I apologize. I am
William, I'm sorry. Rachel's actually ahead of you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't.
Sorry, she's not able to make it. That's why I read her testimony.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. Go ahead, William.
Thank you very much. My name is William, or Bill Cousins. I'm a resident of East Mount Airy, and Councilperson Bass is my representative on City Council. I'm here to speak in favor of that City Council require that PGW allocate the $500,000 in its capital budget for the network geothermal planning of the pilot project. And what I would like to focus on in my brief testimony is the social and racial justice impact of not transitioning off of fossil gas. We are already seeing higher and middle income households making that transition. As one of the previous people spoke, in my neighborhood in East Mount Airy, I know within 2 blocks of my house, I know of 3 houses that have installed air source heat pumps, and in one case, solar panels, and they have moved completely off of fossil gas. And I believe that trend is going to continue over time. We are seeing proposed federal legislation which would provide tax incentives, tax credits for households to electrify their use of electrify their utilities, installing heat pumps, induction stovetops, and air source heat pump water heaters. As this trend continues, we're going to see more and more middle and higher income households will be able to move off of fossil gas, and gas consumption will drop. PGW's fixed cost will be spread over a shrinking volume of gas sales. To cover these fixed costs, PGW will be in a position of having to increase the delivery rates for delivering gas. With higher income households using less gas or no gas at all, the poorer people, the low income and moderate income Philadelphians, will be left holding the bag. They'll be the ones who will, households and landlords that cannot afford to electrify will be the ones paying these higher rates. These higher rates will reinforce the energy burden and poverty of Philadelphia. You'll see rising inability to pay and higher bill delinquencies. This will become an even more severe economic and social justice issue. Several other speakers have referred to this. Peter Winslow referred to it as the death spiral. Jonathan Schrag, who preceded me just briefly, emphasized this growing cost burden due to the departure of higher income consumers from the PGW network. So I urge City Council to restore the $500,000 in the capital budget allocated to planning the network geothermal pilot projects. Thank you for your attention.
I think the chair's having a technical issue. Hold on one second.
Hearing that began this morning at 9 o'clock.
Mr. Iannuzzi, thank you. Was that our last witness to speak?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
All right. I just want to close this hearing and thank all of the participants for being in the hearing today. We will not recess. We will recess this hearing to call the chair, because I believe there'll be opportunities to have ongoing conversations regarding diversification of PGW, just like the fact we're able to bring in speakers from Boise and from other parts of the country. I think there's going to be some opportunities to continue this conversation. And I know I'm currently looking at a national organization that can help with the geothermal discussion and some of the other discussions. I know funding will be part of upcoming budgets for PGW to focus on PGW and some of the other diversification opportunities with PGW and how we can transition into a different future. As I stated earlier in the beginning of this hearing, PGW started as a lighting company in 1836, and we've made other transitions. And if you saw the interesting presentation from Professor Purves, there's an opportunity to PGW to transition like other utilities have done as well. So thank you for your time and energy. Look forward to continuing the conversation as we move forward. This hearing is recessed to the call of the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good job.
Thank you. I appreciate giving me that little indulgence as we